Author, Feng Ling Xiao copy, Zhang Hao penetrated into a true and false gold text and became the canon fodder of the book. On the first day of wearing the book, the wealthy parents came to the door and said that Zhang Li was their biological daughter who had been living abroad for 15 years. According to the plot, the original owner followed the parents home with joy, but found that the parents were obviously close to the adopted daughter. My brother also warned more than once, "My sister is not in good health, don't argue with her about everything." Because of being targeted everywhere by the supporters of the heroine, the original owner was full of resentment, and gradually became blackened. Of course, Zhang Hao couldn't follow the original plot, so she decided to find the original protagonist's grandfather. After arriving at Feng's house, with the support of his grandfather and several older brothers, Zhang Hao suddenly became the favorite of the group. Only the little uncle Feng Qi had a cold face and was lukewarm to her. But a month later, Feng Qi dragged her around to show off, "My niece, direct relative." 3 years later, the Zhang family came to the door and asked Zhang Hao to donate a kidney to Zhang Ruo, and also persuaded her to be kind, saying that only one kidney can survive. Feng Qi rushed home from the Scientific Research Institute without stopping, and protected her behind him. "The person who can bully Xiao has not yet been born." Seeing that Jiang's family still didn't give up, he turned his head to look at his sister who eloped with someone many years ago. Xiao Litzi and Zhang Ruo are not related, but they can match successfully. You pig brain have no doubts. After that, the Zhang family turned their backs on their horses, and those people no longer wanted to trouble Zhang Hao. Zhang Hao looked at Feng Qi curiously, "Uncle, how do you know that Zhang Ruo is the illegitimate daughter of the Zhang family?" Feng Qi spread out his hands, "I said nonsense, who would know that I was hitting right?" Gracilaria. What Zhang Hao didn't know was that not long after she returned home, Feng Qi asked people to investigate the Zhang family. "I haven't said it, I just don't want that brainless sister to abduct his precious niece." But later, his niece was abducted. At that moment, he especially wanted to break that brat's leg. Content labels, Sweet and Zhuangwen from a wealthy family. Search keyword, protagonist, Gracilaria. 1-sentence introduction, do scientific research with your uncle. Purpose, always be positive. Commentary on the work, Zhang Li is a terminally ill cryopreservation volunteer, but he slips into a book of true and false gold and becomes the canon fodder of the book. Thinking of the tragic ending of the original owner's death under the female lead and the shuttle, Zhang Hao chose to stay away from the wonderful family members of the original owner, and worked hard to fulfill her dream of becoming a medical researcher in her previous life. Su Shuang's life as a group pet. Zhang Hao only needs to study hard, make progress every day, and work hard for her dreams. As for the matter of abusing the scumbag and sending the bad guys into the game, her little uncle who loves her and spoils her is responsible. This article has a smooth plot and a clear theme. The heroine has a distinct character and is self-reliant. The full text focuses on the process of the heroine's hard work, as well as the warm and harmonious scene when the heroine and her grandfather's family get along. The intention is positive and it is recommended to read. Zhang Ling was very dizzy and her temples throbbed suddenly. She closed her eyes and slowly sorted out the strange memories that suddenly appeared in her mind. At this moment, she knew that she was no longer the original Zhang Li, because she penetrated into a book and became a cannon fodder in the book. Was she already dead? Gracilia is not afraid of death. She was terminally ill and chose to sign an agreement with the research laboratory to become a cryopreservation volunteer, hoping that humans will be able to conquer cancer in the future. Before entering the freezer, she looked forward to being awakened many years later, but also thought that she might never have a chance to open her eyes again. But she never thought that she would become another person, and a strange memory suddenly appeared in her mind, as well as the content of a book. The original owner of the book is also named Zhang Li, 15 years old this year, a student in the 3rd year of junior high school, and will take the high school entrance examination in 2 months. Because he grew up in an orphanage, the original owner is somewhat introverted and sensitive, and doesn't like to be in contact with strangers. Little scorpion. Someone gently tugged at her sleeve. Zhang Hao opened her eyes and looked at the middle-aged woman with delicate and beautiful features in front of her. At this moment, she was looking at herself with concern. Zhang Hao had the memory of the original owner in her mind, and knew that it was Feng Yun, the original owner's biological mother. She and her husband, Zhang Huai, came to the orphanage to take the original owner home. When the biological parents suddenly came to the door, the original owner was naturally overjoyed and full of expectations for the future life. But according to the plot in the book, the life of the original owner after returning to Jiang's house was not easy. Because the heroine of this book is Zhang Ruo, who was wrongly held since she was a child, and then raised by the Zhang family. It was only after the original owner returned to Jiang's house that he realized that although the parents found out that they were holding the wrong daughter and recognized her, they had no plans to find Zhang Ruo's biological parents. They didn't even plan to reveal the true identity of the original owner, and they also claimed that she was a child adopted by the Zhang family from an orphanage. The original owner was not good at arguing with others, and he thought that he had just been brought home, but Zhang Ruo had already lived in Jiang's house for her for more than 10 years, and his relationship with his family was naturally deeper. At that time, she still had fantasies in her heart, thinking that after spending a long time together in the future, her parents might care about her feelings as much as they care about Zhang Ruo. But as time went by, the original owner realized that his thoughts were too naive. Zhang Ruo is beautiful and a scholar. As a well-known talented child star in the entertainment industry, he is the focus of the crowd wherever he goes. The original owner suddenly became the adopted daughter of the Zhang family, and others would naturally compare her to Zhang Ruo, and then feel that she was inferior to Zhang Ruo in everything. Those sister groups of Zhang Ruo couldn't understand why the Zhang family adopted her with mediocre qualifications, and some even suspected that she was Zhang Huai's illegitimate daughter outside, so they always said some yin and yang strange things in front of her. Those followers of Zhang Ruo also felt that standing beside Zhang Ruo was an insult to the goddess, and could not help but target her. What's even sadder is that the family's attitude towards her and Zhang Ruo has not changed from beginning to end. Although her parents wouldn't deliberately target her, they always ignored her inadvertently. Her brother Zhang Zhou was a typical sister-in-law who helped Zhang Ruo without any principles, and reminded her not to argue with her sister. The original owner was trying to survive in the cracks, and his mentality gradually changed. He began to make trouble for Zhang Ruo. In the end, everyone betrayed their relatives and left, and the end was miserable. Thinking of this, Zhang Hao couldn't help frowning slightly. According to her temperament, she is naturally reluctant to follow the couple in front of her back, but now she is only 15 years old, and she is still a minor, and some things cannot be decided by herself. Because of Zhang Hao's frown and silence, Feng Yun's expression became a little uneasy. "Little Li, mother knows that you have had a hard time these years, but those are all over. We have moved your household registration back to the urban area, and we have also handled the transfer procedures for you. When you go to a new school, you can together with Ruoluo, I met many new friends." Hearing his wife's endless chatter, Zhang Huai's eyes flashed with impatience. He raised his wrist and glanced at the time, then lowered his eyes to Zhang Li. "You have 10 minutes to organize your things, and then come here to join us. Set off." After a pause, he added, "You don't need to bring any daily necessities. There is no shortage of them at home. As for the study materials, the school over there will send them to you." Zhang Hao looked up at the man with a strong attitude in front of her. After being silent for a few seconds, she slowly said, "I have lived in this orphanage for nearly 15 years. Zhang Huai was taken aback and asked, "What do you want to express?" At this moment, he really saw his daughter's face, and suddenly realized that she didn't seem to be as bad as he thought. He only noticed before that his daughter had a bowed head, a slight hunchback, and long and thick bangs, which made her whole person look rustic. But when she suddenly straightened her back and looked up at herself, Zhang Huai realized that her daughter's eyes were particularly clear and bright. Zhang Huai couldn't help but look at the child carefully, only to find that although her complexion was not as white as that of a Ruoluo, her facial features were very delicate. The straight bridge of the nose obviously followed his wife's. As for the eyes, it looked familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it for a while. Zhang Hao completely ignored Zhang Huai's scrutinizing eyes, and said in a calm voice, "Before I saw you, the orphanage was my home, here are my friends, and the dean's grandma who is very good to me, I need to say goodbye to them." This is the original owner's idea, but she is not good at expressing it, so even if she is reluctant, she still follows her parents. But she didn't expect that this time was a farewell, and she never saw those people who had shown kindness to her. Hearing Zhang Li's words, Zhang Huai's conditioned reflex frowned, and just wanted to say that she doesn't need those friends in the future, but Feng Yun spoke first. "You grew up here, and you are leaving today, so it's okay to say goodbye. But don't take too long, because there are still many things in the company waiting for your father to go back to deal with." Feng Yun's smile is kind, and her attitude is also very kind. She looks like she cares about the original owner. But is this really the case? Jiang Hui's assistant came to the orphanage a week ago to draw the blood of the original owner, saying that it was going to be sent for a paternity test. According to the power of the Zhang family, the results of the paternity test should be available soon. But neither Zhang Hui nor Feng Yun came to pick up the original owner at the first time, but came over a week later. The original owner was immersed in the joy of being reunited with his family, and he didn't realize that there was anything wrong with it, but he was just a fan of the authorities. Zhang Hao was not the original owner, so he didn't expect much from the couple in front of him, so he could see it more clearly. From now on, she will be the Gracilleria in the book. As a 15-year-old minor, her household registration and school status have been transferred, and she can only go back to Jiang's house with her biological parents for the time being. But she is not a submissive temperament, and will not let them arrange her life. After being separated from Jiang's parents for a short time, Zhang Hao first went to see the director of the orphanage, who was a very kind old grandmother who was very kind to the original owner. It can be seen that the dean's grandmother is really happy for the original owner. She dragged her and talked for a while, and told her to get along with her parents well in the future. If you have any thoughts, just tell her parents, and don't keep everything in your heart. After separating from the dean's grandma, Zhang Hao went to say goodbye to the original owner's friends. But when a few friends who were good friends with the former master saw her, their expressions were very cramped, probably because their good friends suddenly became rich daughters, and they couldn't adapt for the time being. Only a tall girl with short, broken hair had a normal attitude and asked with a smile, "Will you come back in the future?" Zhang Hao nodded without hesitation, "Yes." The short-haired girl in front of her is called Zhang Tang. She is handsome and straightforward. She fights more ruthlessly than boys. The biggest characteristic is that she protects her shortness. If someone bullies the children of Xing Xing orphanage, she will definitely stand out immediately. In those years in the orphanage, the person the original owner envied the most was Zhang Tang, because she lived the life she longed for the most. But after returning to Jiang's house, because of Jiang Hui's objection, the original owner completely cut off contact with the friends of the orphanage. Even when she donated money to the Xing Xing orphanage, she did so anonymously and did not let anyone know. Although Zhang Hao is not the original owner, her emotions will naturally be affected to some extent because of the memory of the original owner. For example, when facing the Grandma Dean and these little friends, she will feel extra kind. So, she will definitely go back to the orphanage again. As for whether JAC opposes it, it is not in her consideration at all. Zhang Tang's unhesitating attitude made Zhang Tang feel very good. She smiled and rubbed Zhang Li's head as usual. The high school entrance examination will be taken in 2 months, so don't think about coming back during this time. Now, take the exam well and try to go to the best school. Probably because of Zhang Tang's remarks, the children in the orphanage were finally not as cramped as before, and began to talk to Zhang Li as usual. A few 7 or 8-year-old little radishes made it clear that they were reluctant to leave sister Zhang Li. But this atmosphere didn't last long. Zhang Huai's assistant came over to urge Zhang Hao to set off. Zhang Hao and his friends waved goodbye and left the orphanage with the Zhang family. After getting in the car, Feng Yun stopped talking several times before asking, "Little Li, you must have had a hard time all these years, right?" Zhang Hao said truthfully, "It's pretty good." Feng Yun sighed, "How can life in the orphanage be good? We are mother and daughter, you don't need to meet me. The dean's grandmother is very kind, and my friends also take good care of me. It's really good." Zhang Hao said truthfully. Compared with the fiery Zhang family, life in the orphanage is actually more suitable for the original owner. Although she was in an orphanage, the dean's grandmother gave her the same care as her elders. Zhang Tang took care of her like her own sister. Those younger brothers and sisters also listened to her very much. If the Zhang family didn't find her, she should go to high school, go to university, find a job that suits her, and live a dull life. Listening to her daughter's seriousness, Feng Yun smiled awkwardly. In her expectation, after her daughter reunites with herself, she should be very excited, especially relying on her. But Xiao Li's reaction was too bland, making her a little at a loss. Zhang Huai frowned and said, "This time is different from the past. In the future, you will be Miss Jiang's family. There is no need to contact those people in the orphanage. As for puppy love, don't even think about it." "Puppy love?" Zhang Li frowned. Feng Yun also quickly said, "It's normal for you to have a good impression of boys of the same age at your age, but you must not fall in love casually, or your parents will be worried." Gracilaria. Where did this couple see that they had signs of puppy love? Seeing Zhang Hao's puzzled expression, Zhang Huai thought she was feigning stupidity. "You in the orphanage, you don't learn well at a young age, and you do things with girls. You can't fool around with such people in the future." Zhang Hao was stunned for a few seconds, and finally realized that the gangster he was talking about at a young age should be referring to Zhang Tang. She turned around and looked at Zhang Huai. "I think there are 3 points that need to be explained." Jac felt inexplicable. With the facts in front of her, she was just teaching her a few words. Could it be that she still wanted to make a quibble? First, Zhang Tang is a girl. She just dresses a little bit more neutrally. If you don't believe it, you can investigate it yourself. Jac. He really didn't know about this, but the assistant just sent a message saying that he saw Zhang Li and a boy in the orphanage behaving intimately, so he couldn't help but knock a few words. Second, I was thrown at the door of the orphanage when I was a child, and it was the dean's grandma who took me in. Everyone in the orphanage was like a family member to me. If they were gangsters, then I should also be considered gangsters. 1. Jac. I just said one sentence. This girl actually started to argue with her at length? Feng Yun tugged Zhang Hao's sleeve and whispered, "Your father just cares about you, If he really cared about me, he would take the initiative to understand the life I have lived in the past 15 years and the people around me, instead of listening to the assistant's nonsense and questioning me. This is also the third thing I want to say. Point." Zhang Hao's tone was calm, as if he was talking about something trivial. But Assistant Bai in the driver's seat froze obviously. As soon as he saw Zhang Li and boys of the same age behaving intimately, he couldn't help but tell President Zhang, the purpose was of course to earn performance. He dared to do this because he had investigated this real daughter before, and he was expected to be introverted. Even if it was a misunderstanding, she would not say much, and felt that President Zhang and his wife were caring about her. But now it seems that the real daughter of the Zhang family is not easy to provoke at all, and he should be more cautious in his words and deeds in the future, so as not to lose his job accidentally. Zhang Huai was in a bad mood when his own daughter lost face. "I thought in my heart that he was a child who grew up in an orphanage. He was not as well behaved and sensible as Ruoluo. And looking at the little girl's light-hearted look, Zhang Hui felt even more stuffy. Now he finally remembered why he thought the girl's eyes looked familiar. Her eyes were neither like herself nor her wife, but they were very similar to those of her brother-in-law Feng Qi. Especially when she was just arguing with herself, she seemed to have no emotions, but she was able to choke people to the point of being speechless. Everyone said that his nephew, Uncle Xiao, was normal, but when he thought of his brother-in-law Feng Qi, Zhang Huai's face no longer looked good. After that, Zhang Hui had a cold face the whole time, and didn't want to say a word. Feng Yun looked at her daughter and hesitated several times. She wanted to take the initiative to talk to her daughter, but she didn't know where to start. Only Zhang Hao was in a good mood. She looked at the green mountains and green waters that were rapidly retreating outside the car window, and the corners of her mouth rose unconsciously. In real life, she suffers from an incurable disease at a young age, and her wishes are not fulfilled in time, and many things she wants to do have no chance to be done. Now that she has entered a book, become a paper person in the book, and has a healthy body, she naturally wants to live as she pleases. The orphanage where the original owner lived is located in a small county town in Minjiang City, about 300 kilometers away from the urban area. It takes more than 3 hours to drive there. After the car entered the urban area of Minjiang, it drove all the way to the villa area in the western suburbs. Assistant Bai looked through the rear-view mirror to observe the newly recovered Miss Zhang family, only to find that she was not at all cramped. It was as if the luxurious environment around the villa area had nothing to do with her. A child who grew up in an orphanage shouldn't behave like this, so she either really didn't care or she was too good at pretending. Assistant Bai was secretly surprised, and soon made up his mind that he would never take the initiative to provoke this Miss Zhang in the future. Don't look at President Zhang being lukewarm to her now, but with that blood relationship, who can tell what will happen in the future? It's a pity that he has offended Miss Zhang Li once before, and even if he behaves deliberately in the future, it may not leave a good impression on her. How did Zhang Hao know that Assistant Bai had made up so much in her brain? In reality, although she was not born in a wealthy family, she had never been short of money, and naturally she could not be attracted by the villa area in front of her. However, a man and a woman standing on the lawn in front of the Zhang family villa managed to attract her attention. The girls look about the same age as themselves and are very beautiful, while the boys look a little more mature and look a lot like the juvenile version of Jac. The boy was listening to the woman's voice with his head down, and the gentle doting on his face seemed to overflow. Zhang Hao guessed that this should be the fake daughter Zhang Ruo and her sister-in-law, Zhang Zhou, in the book. Following Zhang Hao's line of sight, Feng Yun's eyes immediately became gentle, but she quickly realized that she hadn't told Xiao Hao about Ruoluo. Originally, she planned to say it on the way back to Minjiang, but because of the unpleasantness between Xiaoli and her husband, she forgot about it. Feng Yun was about to explain, when Zhang Ruo noticed the situation here. Her eyes were sparkling, ignoring her brother's instructions to run slowly. She ran over and slammed into Feng Yun's arms, and said coquettishly, "Mom, have you finally brought my sister back?" Feng Yun smiled and stroked her head, "Well, I've brought it back. You sisters can go to school together in the future, so that you can have a company." Then she turned her gaze to Zhang Hao and said with a smile, "Little Hao, this is Ruoluo. You two sisters were wrongly held before, so your father and I always thought she was our biological daughter." Without waiting for Zhang Hao to speak, Zhang Ruo immediately greeted with a friendly attitude, "Hello, sister." Hearing the word sister, Zhang Hao immediately remembered the plot in the novel. After the original owner returned home, Zhang Ruo did call her sister all the time. Later, whenever there was a conflict between the two, Zhang Zhou morally kidnapped the original owner, saying that the younger sister was not in good health, and the original owner should let her as her elder sister, not to argue with her for everything. Zhang Hao had no plans to serve the little princess, and said bluntly, "We are the same age, and our birth dates should be about the same. You can just call me by my name." Seeing Zhang Hao's indifferent attitude, Zhang Ruo was a little helpless, and looked up at Zhang Zhou as if asking for help. Zhang Zhou immediately frowned and looked at Zhang Hao. It's just a title, is it necessary to care so much? Zhang Hao looked up and looked at him, it's just a title, there's really no need to worry about it. Then she turned her gaze to Zhang Ruo, you shouldn't care about it, right? Zhang Ruo. Zhang Zhou didn't expect that his sister's emotional intelligence was so low, and he lost his good face immediately. He turned his head and rubbed Zhang Ruo's head, comforting, since she doesn't appreciate it, you don't need to be too polite to her in the future, just call her by her name. Zhang Ruo pursed his lips and said nothing. It was unpleasant for the son and daughter to meet for the first time, which made Feng Yun a little embarrassed. She looked at Zhang Huai with a look of help, but found that her husband seemed to have nothing to do with her, obviously not ready to take care of it. After hesitating for a moment, she frowned and looked at her son, little Li is also your sister, how do you talk? Zhang Zhou shrugged, she didn't even call her brother, how do you think I should talk to her? Feng Yun was stunned for a few seconds, as if she suddenly realized something. She looked at Zhang Li with hurt eyes, little Li, are you blaming mom and dad for not finding you earlier? Zhang Hao shook her head, I don't think so. Then why? Feng Yun hesitated. The child in front of him is obviously his own daughter, but why does it always give people a feeling of being rejected thousands of miles away? Is it your own delusion? Zhang Hao could roughly guess what Feng Yun was thinking. Thinking of the plot in the book, she suddenly laughed and asked, you mean, I didn't call your parents, nor did I call him brother? Feng Yun. She really thought so, but she never thought that her daughter would ask such a straightforward question. Because I'm not sure yet, will you recognize me? Zhang Hao's voice was cold. Of course we want to recognize you. If we don't recognize you, how can we come all the way to find you? Little Li, you say that, it hurts the hearts of parents too much. Feng Yun looked like she was about to cry, as if she had been wronged by Tianda. Zhang Hao didn't give her a chance to sell miserably at all. But everyone knows that Zhang Ruo is the daughter of the Zhang family. Are you going to announce to the public that we were wronged when we were young? Hearing this, Feng Yun suddenly lost his momentum. They had already discussed this issue before they went to pick up Xyli, and finally unanimously decided not to announce Xyli's identity for the time being, otherwise Ruoluo's situation would become very embarrassing. As for Xiao Li, she declared to the public that she was the adopted daughter of the Zhang family. Anyway, the family knew her true identity and would treat the two children fairly. When Zhang Zhou proposed this plan before, Zhang Huai agreed without much thought. Although Feng Yun hesitated, she also acquiesced to her husband and son's decision. But at this time, when she heard her own daughter's questioning, she always felt a little wrong. Zhang Zhou frowned and looked at Zhang Hao, you care so much about the identity of the daughter of the Zhang family. Zhang Hao shook her head, I don't care. Zhang Zhou sneered, if you really don't care, as for forcing us to reveal your identity as soon as you come back. Although Zhang Huai has been silent, he agrees with his son's words and feels that Zhang Hao's eyelids are too shallow. Zhang Hao and Zhang Zhou looked at each other, wondering, didn't you force me to call someone first? Zhang Zhou. You and I are related by blood, so it stands to reason that you should change your mouth, but if you don't plan to admit that I am your relative, it should be normal for me not to change your mouth. Zhang Ruo looked at Zhang Zhou at a loss, and whispered, brother, or else. Zhang Zhou patted her on the shoulder lightly and reassured, you don't have to worry about these little things. Zhang Huai finally stopped pretending to be dead at this time, and he looked at Zhang Li with condescending eyes. In the 15 years you've been outside, Ruoluo has always been by our side. Everyone knows that she is the daughter of the Zhang family. If you suddenly reveal your identity, Ruoluo will definitely be pointed at by others. But you are different. People in the circle do not know you. As long as you say that you are our adopted daughter, everyone will treat you politely. You should be able to understand, right? Zhang Hao was non-committal, and asked, can you change your words? Zhang Hui frowned, what's the rhetoric? He had already seen that the little girl in front of him was not a fuel-efficient lamp at all, and he just hoped that she would not make any fanciful requests. Since you don't plan to reveal my identity, then tell me that I'm a distant relative of the Zhang family, and I'll just use it temporarily in the Zhang family. Zhang Hao's tone was casual. Feng Yun was about to refute, but Zhang Hui said, yes. In his opinion, Zhang Hao pretended to be indifferent to the world, but she was using retreat as her advance, forcing her family to reveal her identity as the daughter of the Zhang family. He was not as she wished. What surprised Zhang Hui was that this girl's plan had clearly failed, and she didn't cry or make trouble, but she was able to pretend. That night, Feng Yun and Zhang Hui had a night talk. Little Lei would rather let us say that she is a distant relative of the Zhang family than let us say that she is the adopted daughter of the Zhang family. Are you blaming us? Zhang Hui said nonchalantly, she is young and can't understand the thoughts of adults, so she just needs to be angry with us. It will be fine in a few days. Feng Yun frowned slightly, but I always feel that the reason she said that was because she didn't want to change her name to call us Mom and Dad. Zhang Hui snorted coldly, it's just a child's temper. The more you back down, the more she'll get ahead. Could it be that we still let her temper and announce the identities of her and Ruoluo? Feng Yun hesitated for a while, then whispered, she grew up in an orphanage, and no one taught her, so she will inevitably be willful, otherwise. Impossible. Zhang Hui interrupted her, you brought up Ruoluo. We have raised her for more than 10 years, so there is no need to say about the relationship, and Ruoluo and Qin Zheng have a marriage contract. Knowing that Ruoluo is not our own, I'm afraid it will not end well. Feng Yun's eyes were a little confused, isn't it because Ruoluo and Qin Zheng liked each other when they made a verbal engagement with the Qin family? Zhang Hui smiled sarcastically, it's true that Qin Zheng likes Ruoluo, but you think those people in the Qin family are doing charity? I have my own plans for this matter, don't worry about it. Hearing what he said, Feng Yun sighed and stopped insisting. The next morning, the couple got up to eat, only to find that the 3 children were already sitting at the dining table. Feng Yun subconsciously skipped Zhang Zhou and Zhang Ruo, and her eyes fell on her biological daughter Zhang Hao. At this time, Zhang Hao was wearing a large black t-shirt, her long hair was tied into a ponytail with a silk scarf, and her originally heavy bangs were arranged and fixed with black clips. Probably because of having bangs for a long time, the skin tone on her forehead is whiter than the rest of her face, which looks a little out of tune, but it should be easy to cover it up with light makeup. Feng Yun stared at her for a long time, and couldn't help but think, her own daughter has a good appearance, even if she doesn't wear fende, she doesn't look any worse than Ruo. The most important thing is that when the little girl sits at the dining table and eats Western food, although her movements are not very standard, she looks very natural. Such a temperament is not something that can be cultivated in an orphanage. Feng Yun wanted to be close to her daughter, so she took the initiative to sit next to her and said softly, there are so many new clothes in the cloakroom, why don't you wear them? Zhang Hao finally looked away from the dinner plate, and said in a calm voice, there are many clothes in the cloakroom, but the sizes are all too small, and none of them fit me. Hearing Zhang Hao's words, Feng Yun was obviously stunned. She had asked the housekeeper to prepare clothes for Xiaoluo before, but when Ruoluo heard it, she took the initiative to say that she would wrap it on her body, but she didn't expect the clothes to be the wrong size. But this can't blame Ruoluo, because she doesn't know the size of the little Lily at all. I'm sorry, Xiao Li, the clothes that my uncle the housekeeper prepared for you before were all recommended by me, but I didn't expect you to be so tall, otherwise I would have made a mistake. Zhang Zhou couldn't see his sister being wronged, he squinted at Zhang Li, the clothes are not suitable, just let someone change them, you don't need to feel that everyone owes you the same. Zhang Li gently put down the knife and fork in her hand, frowned and asked, what should I do so that you won't think that I think everyone owes me? Before waiting for Zhang Zhou to answer, she asked again, do you have to make me wear those inappropriate clothes so that you won't make trouble unreasonably? According to the content of the novel, the original owner was dazzled by the clothes in the cloakroom on the first day he arrived at Jiang's house. She put on the brand clothes that the hostess carefully selected for her, but she couldn't hold it up at all. It seemed that the word uncomfortable was written all over her body. Even the servants couldn't help discussing in private, saying that the original owner not only looked inferior to Miss Ruoluo, but also had a temperament that was n streets worse than that of Miss Ruoluo, and she didn't look like the Zhang family at all. But those people didn't think that the clothes in the cloakroom were prepared according to Zhang Ruo's size. Although the original owner was slender, he was half a head taller than Zhang Ruo. It would be strange if those clothes fit on her body. However, from the beginning to the end, the novel only emphasized that the original owner was inferior to Zhang Ruo in every way. As for these details, it did not explain clearly at all. Zhang Hao was not the original owner, so she would not force herself to wear inappropriate clothes. Facing Zhang Zhou's deliberately provocative behavior, she was even less likely to bear it. Looking at Zhang Hao's calm and indifferent eyes, Zhang Zhou couldn't find anything to refute for a while. At this moment, he suddenly regretted that he didn't stop his parents to pick up Zhang Hao back. The tension between the son and daughter made Feng Yun a little helpless. She tried to ignore the low pressure around her son and turned to look at Zhang Li. I'll have someone prepare the clothes for you again. Your brother just speaks rudely. In fact, he treats you very well. He has been looking forward to your return, and even went through the transfer procedures for you in person. Zhang Hao shifted his gaze to look at Feng Yun. He didn't ask for my opinion before going through the transfer procedures for me. Feng Yun immediately explained, your previous school was just an ordinary junior high school in the county town, and Minjiang Foreign Language is the best private high school in the province. Zhang Hao interrupted her, then have you ever thought that I'll be taking the senior high school entrance exam in 2 months, and I'll feel uncomfortable changing schools suddenly? In the True and False Qunjin essay, the heroine Zhang Ruo's high school entrance examination scores exceeded the high-level line by more than 90 points, and she was admitted to the elite class of Minjiang No. The original protagonist, as the female protagonist's control group, did not even go to the high school, and could not go to the high school in the main city at all, and could only choose from the few schools in the suburbs. In the name of being good for her, Jiang's family put her student status in a school in the suburbs, and then found a relationship to make her a lone student in the elite class of number 1 middle school, hoping that she could improve her grades sooner. But when she went there, the original owner found that she couldn't keep up with the rhythm of the teachers at all, and she was completely reduced to the bottom professional in the class. Those people in the class knew that she was the Zhang family's adopted daughter, so they couldn't help discussing in private, saying that she and Zhang Ruo were so different, and the Zhang family didn't know what they thought, but they would adopt her. Under the malicious speculation of some people, the rumors that she is Jack's illegitimate daughter also intensified. Unconsciously, the original owner completely isolated himself and no longer communicated with anyone in the class. 3 years of high school life turned the original owner from being introverted and sensitive at the beginning to lifeless, causing many people to be reluctant to approach her. But Zhang Hao has the memory of the original owner. She knows that although the original owner is not a talented party, she has always been diligent and eager to learn. She used to be in the county middle school, and she could get a scholarship after every big exam. With her strength, if she can perform normally, it is definitely more than enough to take the exam. After returning to the Zhang family, her life has undergone earth-shaking changes, but the Zhang family is unaware that it is because of their self-assertion that the original owner's performance is abnormal. They also felt that the family had provided the original owner with such good conditions, but she was neither smart nor motivated, and she was no match for Zhang Ruo. At this time, when he heard Zhang Hao's questioning, Zhang Zhou didn't think there was any problem with the Zhang family's actions, and he smiled meaningfully and asked, "You haven't even gone to school yet, So you've already decided to retreat, yes? Don't you plan to put the blame on me when you fail the high school entrance exam? Zhang Hao looked calm. I'm just refuting what Ms. Feng said just now, because I don't think it's good for me that you handle the transfer procedures for me. Hearing Zhang Hao's words, the whole room was dumbfounded. They never thought that Zhang Hao would call his biological mother Ms. Feng. Feng Yun's face turned red and white, and her lips trembled slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't know how to say it. Zhang Zhou let out a sneer. He knew that this so-called real sister was trying to advance by retreating, but it was only the wrong method. Seeing Feng Yun's shock, Zhang Ruo couldn't help turning his eyes to Zhang Hao. How can you call your mother like that? She will be sad. Zhang Hao said nonchalantly, if you think Aunt Feng sounds better, I can change my tune. Enough. Zhang Hui put the knife and fork in his hand heavily on the dining table. Can't you be quiet while eating? Zhang Hui has always been the authority of the family. As soon as he opened his mouth, Zhang Zhou and Zhang Ruo immediately stopped. Only Feng Yun did not recover from the blow just now, and looked lost. Chrysaleria picked up the cutlery and cut the steak silently, as if she wasn't affected by what happened just now. After breakfast, she was about to leave the dining room when Zhang Hui stopped her. We have already handled the admission procedures for you before, but you still have to take the placement test. Go and pack up the things you need to bring to live on campus. I will ask Assistant Bai to take you to school in advance. Feng Yun raised her head suddenly, her eyes full of surprise. I had already greeted the school board before, and said that I would send Xiaoluo to study in the key class where Ruoluo is located. Why do you say that she wants to take the placement test now? Zhang Ruo's expression was only confused for a moment, and she quickly reacted. She guessed that her father was angry because of what happened just now, so he suddenly changed his mind and wanted to give Zhang Hao a slap in the face. Thinking of the school's rumors about the placement test, Zhang Ruo suddenly felt a little sympathetic to Zhang Hao. Zhang Hao had been studying in the county middle school before, but now she suddenly takes an exam of such hell-level difficulty. After getting the result, it should be a big blow. Zhang Zhou looked at Zhang Li with a half-smile but not a smile, obviously waiting to see a good show. Zhang Hao ignored everyone's inquiring eyes and nodded calmly, no problem. In real life, because of her health, she lives in a nursing home most of the time, and she has very little time to go to school, but she has been studying by herself, and her homework has not fallen behind. Originally, she wanted to take the college entrance examination normally, then go to study medicine, study her own disease, and strive to live longer. It's a pity that her condition deteriorated too fast, and before she could take the high school entrance examination, she unexpectedly learned that her time was short. In the end, she could only choose to sign an agreement and become a frozen volunteer, dreaming that one day she could be awakened and resurrected. At that time, Zhang Hao also lamented the unfairness of fate, but now she suddenly felt that she was relatively lucky, because she got into a book and had a healthy body. Those dreams in real life, in this book, can be realized one by one. Zhang Ruo kept his eyes on Zhang Hao, and when he saw Zhang Hao's longing eyes, he thought she was looking forward to the placement test, so he felt more sympathetic to her. The moment he knew that he was not his parents' biological daughter, Zhang Ruo was really at a loss, and he was worried that his parents would completely transfer their love for him to their biological daughters. Fortunately, her parents didn't stop pampering her because of her blood relationship, and they didn't treat her differently even after Gracie went home. Thinking of this, Zhang Ruo's mood suddenly became clear. As for how her parents would treat Zhang Hao well, she could understand that, after all, she was their biological daughter. The fly in the ointment was that Zhang Li was more difficult to get along with than she thought, but it didn't matter, she just minimized contact with her as much as possible. After leaving the dining room, Zhang Hao went upstairs to pack up. She put the toiletries she brought from the orphanage into her bag, and went to the balcony to pack the clothes she changed and washed yesterday, and then went out to meet Assistant Bai. Assistant Bai showed a slightly surprised look when she saw that she was still carrying the school bag she brought back from the orphanage yesterday. But in just a moment, he put away the surprise and said respectfully, "Miss Zhang Hao, are you planning to go directly to school?" Zhang Li nodded, "I'm going to take the school's placement test." Assistant Bai had received news from Zhang Huai before, and asked him to come over and send Zhang Hao to the school to take the placement test. Naturally, he would no longer show a surprised expression. He just thought it was a little strange, why did Miss Zhang Li take the placement test when she could go directly to the best class in the school? Could it be that she wants to recognize her level and choose a class that suits her? He had investigated Miss Zhang Lei before and found that Miss Zhang Lei's class teacher spoke highly of her, presumably her academic performance should be good, but the quality of teaching there is far worse than the level of Minjiang foreign language. No reference value at all. Thinking of this, Assistant Bai's evaluation of Zhang Li was 2 points higher. In his opinion, it is good to be able to go to the best class in the school, but if you can't keep up with the teaching progress, it is also a very troublesome thing. Now that the senior high school entrance examination is approaching, it is the most critical time. If you cannot adapt to the new learning environment and teaching rhythm, you will not only waste time, but also need to bear huge psychological pressure. In this regard, he has actually considered it for a long time, but as an assistant, his responsibility is to implement the instructions issued by the boss. As for other things, he is not qualified to manage. What he didn't expect was that Miss Zhang Li would take the initiative to ask for the placement test. In this way, although you still have to adapt to the new environment, it is better to be able to go to a class that suits you than to go directly to a key class. Thinking that her child was the same age as Miss Zhang Li, who was also taking the high school entrance examination this year, Assistant Bai's attitude towards Zhang Li couldn't help being a little kinder. After he started the car, he couldn't help but remind, Minjiang Foreign Language is the best private middle school in the province, it rarely accepts transfer students midway, and the placement test after transfer is notoriously difficult. Complete all questions within the allotted time. Zhang Hao looked at him in surprise, "Are you reminding me that I don't need to be under psychological pressure during the exam?" When a little girl saw through her mind and said it so frankly, Assistant Bai's expression became a little unnatural. But Miss Zhang Hao didn't wait for her to answer, she continued, "Thank you for reminding me." Assistant Bai didn't expect her to be so polite, and her expression became even more unnatural. He hesitated for 3 minutes, and when he stopped and waited at the red light, he turned his eyes to look at Zhang Li, and said sincerely, "Miss Zhang Li, I want to apologize to you. I misunderstood you at the Sing Sing orphanage that day." "No need to apologize." Zhang Hao interrupted him, "You are Mr. Jiang's assistant, and it is your duty to report my situation to him." Hearing that she called her father Mr. Jiang, Assistant Bai was shocked and didn't know what to say for a while. The car drove slowly in the urban area, and soon arrived at Minjiang Foreign Language School. The school's guard obviously knew the Zhang family's car and let it go. After getting off the car, Assistant Bai took Zhang Hao to the teaching office. The dean's hair was half white but full of energy. He looked at Zhang Li with an inquiring look, "Are you the adopted daughter of Mr. Jiang's family?" Zhang Hao shook his head, "I'm just a distant relative of the Zhang family." The director of the teaching department was slightly stunned. How could this be different from what he had learned before? He looked at Assistant Bai with suspicious eyes, and Assistant Bai was actually a little confused, but he seemed calm. "Miss Zhang Li is indeed the child of a distant relative of the Zhang family. Because something happened to her family, she was temporarily arrested. President Zhang adopted it." As soon as the dean heard this, he showed a sudden realization. He was quite puzzled before. The Zhang family clearly has both children, so why should they adopt a child and go through the transfer procedures for her when the senior high school entrance examination is approaching? But if the Zhang family adopted a child from a relative's house, that would be over. As for Zhang Hao's deliberate emphasis that she was only a child of President Jiang's distant relatives, the Dean of Education understood that she was a sudden change and could not accept the fact that she was adopted for a while. The word change in Assistant Bai's mouth is probably both parents died, because if her parents were still there, how could she send her own children to be raised by others? Thinking of this, the Dean's eyes when looking at Zhang Li became a lot more loving. He took out the placement test paper he had prepared before, and said in a gentle voice, "The placement test only takes 3 subjects, Chinese, mathematics, and English. The number of questions is relatively large and the difficulty is high. The final questions are all changed from previous year's competition questions. Don't stress too much, just write what you know." He didn't say the test time. Zhang Hao didn't ask. She took the test paper to the table opposite the Dean, took out the stationery and scratch paper from the school bag, and started to answer. The first thing she did was the math test paper, but after doing a few questions, she couldn't help but look surprised. Just now, Assistant Bai and the Dean had reminded that the exam questions were difficult, and Zhang Hao was already mentally prepared. But in her opinion, these topics are not very difficult. Is there a trap that she can't see? Zhang Li suppressed the doubts in her heart and continued to answer questions in an orderly manner. In real life, because of her health, she couldn't concentrate on studying for a long time, let alone taking exams together with several subjects like this, so she always paid attention to time allocation, and spent a lot of time researching how to answer questions efficiently. But now, her body is very healthy, so naturally she doesn't have to think about this issue anymore. Time passed unknowingly. After Zhang Li finished the 3 exam papers, she twisted her neck slightly, and when she looked up, she found the Dean standing beside her. Because of the surveillance in the office, the Dean did not stare at her all the time. When Zhang Hao was doing the questions, he was dealing with his own affairs, only occasionally looking up. But what he didn't expect was that the child's answering speed was so fast, and none of the 3 test papers was left blank. Just don't know how accurate it is. Out of curiosity, the Dean opened the encrypted file on the computer, and after calling up the standard answer, he began to grade Zhang Li's math test paper in person. In the subject of mathematics, although the problem-solving method is not unique, the answer is unique. Even if he does not teach mathematics, there is no problem in correcting the test paper. But the more he reviewed it, the more surprised the Dean became. He had seen the focused expression of the little girl when she answered the question, and knew that the child's grades should be good. But only now he discovered that the math test paper in front of him, except for a small problem in the finale, could not find a deduction point anywhere else. Is this more than good? It's just perfect. The lines are pleasing to the eye, and he doesn't need to count the points at all. He knows that this kid is the top student in the school. With such anticipation, the Dean immediately picked up the English test paper next to him and began to mark it against the answers. The more questions to be corrected, the better the mood of the Dean. When the composition part was approved, he finally took his eyes off the test paper and looked at Zhang Li with a smile. The remaining parts that have not been approved, I will ask the subject teacher to approve it later. You can rest here first, and I will ask the head teacher of the key class to lead you to her class later. The Dean's attitude was too attentive, but Zhang Hao looked calm. She smiled and nodded, "Thank you, Director." The Dean smiled and said, "It's true that I am the Dean, but I also take the chemistry class of your class. You can just call me Teacher Li." Zhang Hao immediately changed his words, "Thank you, Teacher Li." Then, she turned to look at Assistant Bai, who was surprised that he hadn't left yet. Assistant Bai has not recovered from the shock at all. He has been assistant to President Zhang for many years, and he also knows that young Master Zhang Zhou and Miss Zhang Ruo are both very good children, but compared to Miss Zhang Hao, they are obviously not enough to watch. In this world, who doesn't like an excellent scholar? It's no wonder that Director Li's attitude is so different before and after. Director Li looked at Zhang Hao, obviously looking at a baby bump. He personally went to the water dispenser next to him to pick up a glass of water and put it on the desk where Zhang Li was sitting, and took out a package of snacks from the drawer of his desk and handed it over. I've been doing this question for so long. I must be hungry and thirsty. Let's eat something to pamper your stomach first. Chrysaleria took the snack and tore open the package. Thank you, Teacher Li. Director Li waved his hand casually. What's there to thank for this? I'm just borrowing flowers to offer Buddha. Ah. Zhang Hao was puzzled. I found these from those little who were stealing snacks in class, just to fill your stomach. Director Li's smiling eyes narrowed into slits, looking especially like an old fox. Chrysaleria. Assistant White. When the two of them were stunned, Director Li began to think, it's okay to eat a little snack occasionally, but your age is the time to grow your body, the key is to eat a full meal. Snacks are not nutritious, eat too much okay. Zhang Hao nodded while eating bear biscuits, showing an humbly educated look. She felt that the tone of Director Li's speech in front of her was especially like that of the housekeeper's grandfather who took care of her in reality, because the housekeeper's grandfather liked to worry about her eating, and was always thinking about it. Just then, there was a knock on the door of the teaching office. Director Li just said the word in, and a tall boy in a white school uniform walked in from the door of the office. I'm here to return the key to the laboratory. The boy looked a little sloppy, and his attitude when speaking was quite casual, probably because the voice-changing period was not over yet, and his voice was a little hoarse, but it was not unpleasant. When he found out that there was a strange girl in the office of the Academic Affairs Office, he subconsciously took a second glance. The girl is very beautiful and looks familiar between her brows and eyes, but he is sure that he has never seen this girl before. As for the bag of bear biscuits in her hand, it looked like the bag that Yan Wangli took from her. Director Li stretched out his hand to take the key handed by the boy and turned his eyes to Zhang Li. This kid is called Tong Yi, and you two will be classmates from now on. Zhang Hao nodded obediently, looking like a good student, then turned to look at the tall boy in front of him. At the same time, the description of Tong Yi in the novel quickly appeared in her mind. As the background board in the book, Tong Yi is a typical representative of Shang Zhongyang. He has been smart and wise since childhood, his IQ far exceeds that of his peers, and he is also extremely gentle and polite. But in his third year of junior high school, he suddenly dropped out of school for some reason, and it will be 2 years later when he returns to school again. After returning to school, Tong Yi seemed to be reborn. Not only did his studies plummet, but his personality also became unruly, and he exuded a nasty aura all over his body. After the original owner transferred to Minjiang foreign language, he was placed in the last row and became Tong Yi's table mate. Because Zhang Ruo had told the original owner in advance that Tong Yi had a bad temper and told her not to provoke her when she had nothing to do, the original owner did not dare to take the initiative to talk to Tong Yi. But a week later, Tong Yi offered to let the original owner do his homework for him, saying that he was willing to pay her. After a little thought, the original owner agreed to Tong Yi's request. After returning to Jiang's house, she did not lack pocket money, but the supplementary card given by Zhang Huai could only be swiped and not withdrawn in cash. If she wanted to send money to the orphanage, she had to find another way. After she started to do homework for Tong Yi, those people in the class who originally loved to be yin and yang in front of her, were a little restrained because they took Tong Yi's face into consideration. But it didn't take long for the Zhang family to find out about the original owner helping Tong Yi to do his homework. Zhang Huai looked at her with an angry look, and Feng Yun also advised her not to get too close to a gangster like Tong Yi, so as not to ruin her reputation. After that, the original owner refused to do homework for Tong Yi, and Tong Yi didn't force her. The two seemed to have returned to the state where the well water did not break the river at the beginning. After that, Tong Yi suddenly went abroad and didn't even take the high school entrance examination. As for the follow-up development, it was not explained in the book, so she naturally had no way of knowing. Tong Yi saw the unfamiliar girl opposite him staring at him all the time. He couldn't help but take 2 steps forward and looked at her condescendingly. I'm so good looking? As for keeping you staring. Director Li frowned. Just as he was about to reprimand him, the little girl next to him nodded calmly. Director Li. Tong Yi was also speechless. He felt that he was being molested by the transfer student in front of him. It was rare to see Tong Yi slumped. Director Li couldn't help laughing. This is Zhang Li, who just transferred to another school. You have nothing to do anyway, so take her to pick up the review materials and school uniform. Your head teacher will be here in a while. And then arrange a dormitory for her. Tong Yi glanced at Yan Wangli with a surprised look, then lowered his head and glanced at the 2 exam papers that were almost all on the table. After roughly checking the difficulty of the questions, he finally nodded lazily, okay. Before leaving the academic affairs office, Zhang Hao turned to look at Assistant Bai, who had been silent. The matter of transferring credits has been resolved, you don't need to follow me anymore. Assistant Bai immediately said, Miss Zhang Li, you want to live on campus, I can stay here to help you move things. Zhang Hao shook his head, no need, I didn't have much to put in. Hearing what she said, Assistant Bai immediately noticed the whitewashed canvas school bag on the desk. There really isn't a lot of stuff in there. Thinking that when Miss Zhang Ruo and young Master Zhang Zhou start school every time, the wife will prepare a lot of things for them in large and small packages, and President Zhang will also take time out of his busy schedule to send the 2 to report. Assistant Bai feels that this is in front of him. The situation of the real daughter is too miserable. Fortunately, Miss Zhang Li is smart and knows how to plan for herself, otherwise she might suffer from depression. After leaving the academic affairs office, Tong Yi took Zhang Li to collect school uniforms and materials. He asked Zhang Li to hold the school uniform, while he easily carried a stack of documents and walked to the classroom of Class 1 of the 3rd grade. It was only after 12 noon, and there was no one in the classroom. Tong Yi put the book on the empty table in the last row, turned to look at Zhang Li, this table is empty for now, you will be yourself in a while. Find Lao He to arrange a place. Zhang Hao looked at the stack of brand new books on the table next to her, raised her eyes and asked, you don't want to be at the same table with me? Tong Yi. Under normal circumstances, no one would like to sit in the last row, not to mention that this transfer student is a good student with excellent academic performance. If it wasn't for the clear eyes of the transfer student, Tong Yi would almost suspect that she was mocking herself. He spread his hands and said indifferently, sit wherever you like, just don't disturb my sleep. After saying this, he sat on the back against the wall, took out a pillow from the desk drawer and prepared to sleep. Before he got down on the ground, Zhang Hao said quickly, let's make a deal. Tong Yi frowned, thinking he had hallucinated. Do you think that you lack someone to write your homework? Zhang Hao looked at Tong Yi with particularly sincere eyes. On the night the original owner was taken back to Jiang's house, JAC gave her a secondary card anyway, but now the person who returned to Jiang's house has become himself, but JAC seems to have forgotten about it. Probably because he never gave Zhang Hui face from beginning to end, making Zhang Hui feel that his authority as a parent has been challenged, and he wants to give himself a little pain? It is impossible for Zhang Hui to bow to Zhang Hui. But all the original owner's savings add up to less than 300 yuan. If she doesn't want to make some money, she will be hungry soon. Zhang Hao's tone was too natural, and Tong Yi was successfully amused by her, and he didn't even doze off. Who gave you the illusion that I need someone to do the homework? Zhang Hao was stunned for a moment, and asked reluctantly, are you sure you don't need it? Tong Yi rested his chin with one hand and looked at Zhang Li, give me a reason for what I need. Zhang Hao was silent for 2 seconds, and changed the subject calmly, is it easy to get the scholarship from our school? Tong Yi nodded subconsciously, but soon showed a self-deprecating smile, you and the last of the grades are discussing whether the scholarship is good or not. What do you mean? Gracilaria. Tong Yi didn't seem to take what had just happened to his heart. He tapped his finger on the table lightly. Are you short of money? Zhang Hao nodded calmly, and did not seem to think that lack of money was such an embarrassing thing. Tong Yi took out his mobile phone from his pocket. Receipt code. Ah! Zhang Hao was slightly stunned. After you get the scholarship, you will pay me back double. Tong Yi said in a business-like tone. I don't have a cell phone. Zhang Hao admitted frankly. Tong Yi. The school does stipulate that students are not allowed to bring mobile phones, but how many people will comply these days? It turns out that the new table mate is a good girl. Zhang Hao ignored Tong Yi's surprised eyes and asked, does the cafeteria accept cash? Tong Yi stared at her for a few seconds, then slowly took out the meal card from his pocket. By the way, bring me a glutinous rice cake. Zhang Hao instantly understood that the school did not accept cash, and she did not have a meal card yet, so it seemed that she could only temporarily borrow this table mate. She asked for the general direction of the cafeteria, and left with Tong Yi's meal card. In the cafeteria, Zhang Hao's plate was full of various dishes. Now that she is healthy, she no longer needs to think about what she can and cannot eat. Naturally, she will have a good time. The meal process was generally quite pleasant, but when she was about to brush a glutinous rice cake for Tong Yi after the meal, Zhang Ruo suddenly appeared across from her. Zhang Ruo was supported by a few girls in the middle, and looked at Zhang Hao with a smile. You just finished the placement test, how do you think it is difficult? Before Zhang Ruo could answer, a girl with a high ponytail next to Zhang Ruo shouted, Luo Ruo, is this the girl your family adopted from the orphanage? She looks pretty. The smile on Zhang Ruo's face froze slightly, but soon returned to normal. She didn't answer the girl with the high ponytail, but continued to look at Zhang Li. Actually, it doesn't matter if you don't do well in the exam, as long as you don't make Dad angry anymore. He will definitely find a way to transfer you to the key class. Since today is Sunday, there are not many students in the cafeteria. Zhang Hao, who is not wearing a school uniform, has long attracted the attention of some people. Now when Zhang Ruo appears, everyone's eyes are almost concentrated in this direction. Zhang Hao ignored everyone's scrutiny and looked directly into Zhang Ruo's eyes. It was you who told them that I was an orphan adopted by the Zhang family. She used affirmative sentences. Zhang Ruo immediately denied, no. I didn't say these words, I just told them that you will transfer to our class. Looking at Shang Zhonglu's two cold eyes, Zhang Ruo actually felt that he had nothing to hide, and his voice became smaller and smaller until he couldn't hear it at all. At this moment, Zhang Ruo's heart was completely empty. When she first knew that her parents were not her biological parents, she didn't want to believe that it was true, but the results of the paternity test were in front of her eyes, and the parents had begun to look for their biological daughters, so she couldn't bear it. Fortunately, her parents have always comforted her, saying that no matter what happens in the future, she will be the daughter of the Zhang family, and no one can change this. The elder brother expressed his position without hesitation, saying that he only had one younger sister, and the so-called biological younger sister was just a stranger to him. At that time, Zhang Ruo was very contradictory. She hopes that her parents will find their biological daughter earlier, but at the same time she is worried that after finding her biological daughter, her parents will no longer spoil her as much as before. What she is more worried about is that parents' biological daughters are not easy to get along with. If they have conflicts in the future, parents will definitely stand by their biological daughters. After spending a period of time in fear, Zhang Ruo felt that his worries were unnecessary. Because Mom and Dad didn't take her back to Jiang's house immediately after they found Zhang Li, and they didn't plan to reveal her identity to the public. At that time, Zhang Ruo was actually quite guilty. She even felt that as long as her parents kept pampering her as always, it would be fine even if Zhang Lu's identity was revealed. But after meeting Zhang Hao, Zhang Ruo realized that she was completely different from what he imagined. Zhang Hao obviously didn't fight for anything, and her father and brother's attitude towards Zhang Hao was also very cold, but for some reason, she still felt a sense of crisis. What Zhang Hao just said was to tell everyone that she was the biological daughter of the Zhang family, and that she was just a thief who took up her identity. Seeing Zhang Ruo's apparent guilty conscience, Zhang Hao didn't want to entangle with her anymore, and was about to buy glutinous rice cakes to go back to the classroom, but the tall ponytail reached out and stopped her. What is your attitude? Ruoluo is just telling us the truth. Why are you so cold? Are you afraid to admit your orphan status? Gao Ponytail's voice was sharp and her expression was excited, as if she was the party involved. Are you holding an injustice for Zhang Ruo? Shouldn't it be right? Gao Maiyai took it for granted. Uncle Zhang took you back from the orphanage, gave you food and drinks, and even if you are not grateful to date, he even put on a pair of clothes in front of Ruoluo. The appearance of the real lady, who gave you the confidence. Zhang Ruo reached out and grabbed the girl's school uniform sleeve. Hearing the word Mian Mian, Zhang Li immediately connected the girl with the high ponytail in front of her with the girl named Shen Mian in the book. As the girlfriend of the heroine Zhang Ruo, Shen Mian is outspoken and often does bad things with good intentions. In that book, she has targeted the original owner more than once, even if Zhang Ruo persuaded him to no avail. However, Zhang Ruo can really be called persuasion? Zhang Hao turned his gaze to Zhang Ruo. I forgot to remind you that my temper is not as good as you think. If your friend provokes again, you will bear the consequences yourself. After saying this, Zhang Hao went to the dining window without looking back, took a glutinous rice cake, packed it, and brought it back to the classroom. Although Shen Mian was outspoken, she was not completely out of her mind. She felt that Zhang Hao's attitude was so arrogant, it must be because she had something to rely on. So she turned to look at Zhang Ruo. What's wrong with this orphan? Why is she so arrogant? Zhang Ruo bit his lip and frowned. Anyway, just don't mess with her in the future. Shen Mian showed a surprised expression. I'm not holding grievances for you, shouldn't you have any handle on her? No. Zhang Ruo flatly denied. Seeing Shen Mian's apparent disbelief, he continued, I also learned last night that although Zhang Li grew up in an orphanage, she is actually a child of our relatives, so please don't mess with her, okay? Shen Mian was stunned for a moment, frowned and said, then she came to your house, she is considered to be under the fence, why is she so arrogant? Zhang Ruo. She doesn't like lying, because after lying, she always needs to use countless lies to make up for the lie. But there was no turning back when she opened the bow, and now she had no choice. After a few seconds of silence, Zhang Ruo finally said, as you know, my father started from scratch. Zhang Hao's family helped my father a long time ago, so we always have to take good care of her. Is that so? Shen Mian showed a thoughtful expression. No wonder she looked so confident just now, it was because she was kind to your family before. Zhang Ruo was silent. Shen Mian gave a hum, but I still don't like her. I bully you with a little kindness. If your brother finds out, I will definitely not have a good life with her. Seeing that Shen Mian was successfully fooled by himself, Zhang Ruo finally breathed a sigh of relief. Obviously, she also wanted to confess to the people around her that she was not the biological daughter of her parents, but when the words came to her lips, she realized how difficult it was. Maybe after graduating from junior high school, she can choose a high school where no one knows her, and start a new life, so she no longer has to worry that someone will expose her. What Zhang Ruo didn't know was that although Shen Mian believed her words, he turned around and sent a message to Zhang Zhou, describing what happened just now with more detail. When Zhang Hao returned with the glutinous rice cake, he found that several classmates had already come to the classroom, and everyone was sitting in their respective seats, busy with their work. As soon as Zhang Hao entered the door, the boy near the door felt his eyes light up. He put down the pen in his hand and asked in a friendly manner, "Classmate, did you go to the wrong classroom?" "That's right. Zhang Hao went straight to the last row after answering the boy's words. Seeing that Tong Yi had fallen asleep on the pillow, she put the glutinous rice cake on his desk, and then lowered her head to sort out the books and materials on her desk. Seeing this situation, the boy who wanted to chat with her immediately dismissed the idea. He turned his head and asked in a low voice, "Have you seen this girl before? You are too daring to provoke Tong Yi." Sitting at the same table, his voice was even lower than his, "She and Tong Yi should know each other. I just saw that she put snacks and meal cards on Tong Yi's desk." Out of the corner of the boy's eyes, he noticed that Zhang Hao was sorting out books, and said in surprise, "Will she also be a classmate in our class in the future? Wouldn't our class have 2 transfer students at the same time?" The story that the Zhang family adopted a girl from the orphanage had already spread in the class, and they had long known that the girl the Zhang family adopted would be transferred to the class. The boy did not connect Zhang Hao with the girl the Zhang family adopted. Because he had heard Shen Mian say before that the girl the Zhang family adopted came from an orphanage in a remote county, so she must have never seen anything in the world. But the girl in front of her, even if she was wearing a simple t-shirt and slacks, could never have come out of an orphanage. What's more, she knew Tong Yi, it was even more impossible. The boy couldn't help but took out his mobile phone and clicked on the group chat box to report to everyone about the transfer students in the class, emphasizing that the transfer students are beautiful. However, everyone didn't believe what he said at all, and they said that there was no picture and no truth, so he quickly took a photo and sent it to the group for everyone to see. The boy immediately retorted that the girl seemed to have a lot to do with Tong Yi, and he didn't have the guts to take pictures secretly. Whoever has the guts will go. Hearing the seriousness of what he said, several students in the class were eager to try it out, saying that they would come over in advance to see if the new classmates were really as beautiful as the boys said, and also said that there will be 2 transfer students in the class today. Can be more beautiful than anyone else. But someone soon said that no matter how beautiful the transfer students were, they would definitely not be as beautiful as Zhang Ruo, the class flower in their class, and everyone didn't have to have high expectations. The boy glanced at the group news, then turned to look at the new classmate. If you put aside Zhang Ruo's star halo and make a comparison, the new classmate's facial features are obviously more refined, and her temperament is also very good, but her skin tone is not as fair as Zhang Ruo's. Although the boy had such an idea, he didn't say it in the group, because his class also had Zhang Ruo's fans, and he was obviously asking for a beating and hating his new classmates, but he was not so rude. Shen Mian saw the message popping up on her phone, and immediately joined the group chat. Seeing everyone talking about the 2 transfer students, she immediately revealed that the girl adopted by Zhang Ruo's family was taking the placement test today. The level is definitely not divided into key classes. But compared to the adopted daughter of the Zhang family, everyone was obviously more concerned about the girl who had a close relationship with Tong Yi. Shen Mian said a lot, but few people interacted with her at all. After Zhang Hao had sorted out all the study materials, many people had come to the class one after another. She knew that there must be Zhang Ruo's friends or fans among them, and she was ready to be troubled. However, although those people were looking at her calmly, no one came to talk to her, which surprised her. Just when Zhang Hao was wondering, she saw a woman with short ears and a big belly entering the classroom. As soon as the woman entered the classroom, the students in the class who were talking in a low voice immediately quieted down. Zhang Hao guessed that this should be the head teacher of the first class of the 3rd grade. The woman's eyes swept around the class and went straight to the last row. She looked at Zhang Li with a smile on her face. "You are the newly transferred Zhang Li. I heard Director Li say that you have already received the school uniform and study materials." Zhang Hao nodded, got up from her seat, and gave the seat to the pregnant head teacher. Looking at the well-behaved and sensible child in front of him, Mr. He sat down with a gentle smile. "My surname is He. I'm your head teacher and language teacher. I've contacted your life teacher just now. She will come to take you to collect daily necessities and go through the formalities for living on campus. Speaking of this, she suddenly noticed Tong Yi, who was sleeping on the desk, but she just frowned and didn't wake him up. Thinking that Director Li had specially warned that Zhang Li might be a popular candidate for the top spot in the senior high school entrance examination this year, so she must take good care of her, teacher, he reached out and pushed the glasses on the bridge of her nose. Your seat, I will arrange it for you later. Where are you used to sitting before? No need to change. Zhang Hao shook her head and refused. I'm fine sitting here. She also just wanted to understand that the reason why those people in the class didn't come to trouble her was probably because they tabooed the sleeping next to her and didn't dare to disturb his sleep. For Gracie, it didn't matter who was at the same table, but she hated unnecessary trouble. The sleeping next to him happened to be not troublesome at all. He took the initiative to borrow his meal card, and he didn't snort when he fell asleep. The key is to help himself avoid unnecessary troubles, which is simply perfect. Teacher, he looked at Zhang Hao hesitantly, and felt that she would not change her seat. It must be because she didn't know Tong Yi yet. She was about to persuade Zhang Hao to change her position, but found that the life teacher had already come, so she could only temporarily dispel the idea. The life teacher took Zhang Hao to collect the daily necessities, and arranged the dormitory for her, then handed her a card and told her that the card could be used in the cafeteria and the school supermarket, so she could recharge it herself. In the quadruple room arranged by the life teacher for Zhang Hao, there were still 2 vacant beds. One was at the outermost position by the door, and the other was at the innermost position near the bathroom. Zhang Hao chose the bed inside. She put the things into the storage cabinet one by one, and then made the bed, put on her school uniform, went to the canteen window to recharge, and then packed a fruit meal and brought it back to the classroom. When she returned to the classroom, just in time for the work meeting, teacher, he kindly waved her over to let her over, briefly introduced her situation, explained her identity as a transfer student, and proposed to let the classmates take care of the new classmate. As for Zhang Hao's grades, she didn't say much. After all, there was always a process of adaptation after coming to a new environment. She didn't want to put too much psychological pressure on her new classmates. The moment Zhang Ruo appeared, Zhang Ruo was stunned. She never thought that Zhang Li would be assigned to the key class. When asked by Shen Mian today, she lied in a hurry, but she was not worried that the lie would be exposed, because she expected that Zhang Li would not be assigned to the key class. After all, Zhang Li had been living in a small county before, and the teaching level there was limited. Even if Zhang Li was the first, what if she came here? She would still be hanged and beaten. But Zhang Li was actually assigned to a key class, which proved that her grades had far surpassed many of her classmates in the school. Zhang Ruo's grades have always been stable, and her ranking has remained in the top 10 of the grade. As long as she performs normally, she will definitely be admitted to the elite class of number 1 middle school. But now, she is beginning to worry that Zhang Hao will surpass herself, because since Zhang Hao returned home, she has brought her too many surprises. Shen Mian didn't expect Zhang Li to be assigned to a key class, but that didn't stop her from hating Zhang Li. She rolled her eyes, and suddenly said in a loud voice, "Mr. He, don't let the new classmates be themselves. Introduce." Teacher, he didn't see that Shen Mian was targeting the new classmates. She turned her head to look at Zhang Li with a smile. "Let's briefly introduce yourself to the classmates." Before Zhang Hao could speak, Shen Mian said loudly again, "Tell me about your previous school and where you live, so we can get to know each other better." Several boys in the class also cheered. "That's right, you can also talk about what you like and what you are good at. If you are willing to show your talents, it will be even better." Yes, yes, to show talents, everyone who transfers to our class should have talent shows. Zhang Ruo's thoughts were interrupted by the noisy voices around her. As soon as she raised her head, she met Zhang Hao's indifferent eyes. For some reason, she suddenly remembered what Zhang Hao said in the cafeteria at noon. Zhang Ruo stood up abruptly, and immediately attracted the attention of many people. Teacher He looked at her with surprised eyes. Zhang Ruo, what's wrong with you? Zhang Ruo stretched out his hand to cover his stomach, and his voice was as low as a mosquito. I want to take a leave of absence to go to the infirmary. Shen Mian didn't bother to trouble Zhang Hao, she immediately reached out to support Zhang Ruo. Mr. He, let me go with Ruo. Teacher He looked concerned. Well, with her, if the problem is serious, call 120 for help. Shen Mian nodded again and again, and then helped Zhang Ruo to leave the classroom. When the two of them walked away, Teacher He turned to look at Zhang Hao again, and said with a smile, simply introduce yourself to the classmates. Zhang Hao nodded, then faced the crowd, and said in a calm voice, my name is Zhang Hao, I live in the Sing Sing orphanage in Qingzi County, and now I am temporarily living in a relative's house, so I have nothing to show. After speaking, Zhang Hao turned his eyes to Teacher He, and then returned to his position with Teacher He's acquiescence. It was only then that everyone discovered that the new classmate's personality seemed to be too indifferent, and it seemed that he was not good at communicating with others. But that's not the point. The point is, she just said that her family lives in the Qingzi County orphanage, and the orphan adopted by the Zhang family came from there. Could it be that Zhang Hao is the child that Zhang Ruo's parents adopted from the orphanage? Then Zhang Ruo suddenly left while clutching his stomach. Was it really uncomfortable, or was it because she couldn't get along with Zhang Hao? A few thoughts turned around in their hearts, and the eyes of Zhang Ruo's fans changed when they saw Zhang Hao, but they had to look back when they thought that she might have a close relationship with Tong Yi. Zhang Hao returned to his seat and found that Tong Yi had already woken up. At this time, he looked straight at himself, his eyes seemed to be studying cultural relics. Zhang Hao thought for 2 seconds and felt that sleeping god might be hungry. After hesitating for a moment, she put the fruit meal she just bought from the cafeteria in the middle of the desks of the two of them. You will be divided into half. Tong Yi wasn't interested in those fruits that were not particularly fresh, so he kept staring at Zhang Li's eyes until Zhang Li frowned slightly before he took his eyes back. However, the corner of his eye kept falling on Zhang Li, as if he was thinking about something. 20 minutes later, the class meeting was over. Teacher He asked everyone to study by themselves and left the classroom. Zhang Hao turned to look at Tong Yi. Is it because I have been staring at you in the academic affairs office before? Tong Yi was taken aback. What? Zhang Li raised her eyebrows. Otherwise why do you keep staring at me? Tong Yi. He suddenly discovered that although the new classmates have a more eccentric way of thinking, they are honest and cute. After a few seconds of silence, he asked, are you the girl the Zhang family adopted from the orphanage? Zhang Hao shook his head, it's not an adoption, I'm just a relative of the Zhang family. Tong Yi frowned subconsciously, did he think too much? But... Tong Yi reached into the drawer, took out a medical weekly, and threw it on Gracie's table. Look at this. Zhang Hao's gaze shifted to the cover of the magazine. She looked at the young man in a suit and leather shoes on the cover and asked curiously, Medical Weekly even invites celebrities to speak. Tong Yi. He resisted the urge to run wild and said word by word, he is a pharmacist and only won the Lasker Prize for Medicine last year. Zhang Hao's eyes lit up, it's amazing. She opened the magazine and was about to read the contents, but Tong Yi suddenly reached out and covered the cover. I'll send it to you, you'll take it back and read it later. Thank you. Zhang Hao said sincerely. You don't know the man on the cover? Tong Yi asked. Zhang Hao was stunned for a moment, then shook his head slowly, it looks familiar, but I've definitely never seen it before. He's Zhang Ruo's uncle. When saying this, Tong Yi's eyes stared at Zhang Hao's face without blinking, not wanting to miss any of the micro-expressions on her face. Zhang Hao was obviously stunned for a moment, and subconsciously repeated, Zhang Ruo's uncle. Zhang Ruo's uncle, isn't that the original owner's uncle? However, this character is not mentioned in the novel. Such a powerful character should not be mentioned in the light of reason. Zhang Hao's gaze fell on the magazine cover again. This person was not Zhang Ruo's uncle, but the original owner's uncle, and he could barely be regarded as his own uncle. No wonder he felt that this person was familiar, because the eyes of this uncle were almost identical to the eyes of the original owner in the mirror. Zhang Hao spun the pen with her fingers, and the corners of her mouth rose slightly. She chose to go back to Minjiang with the Zhang family before because she was still a minor, and her household registration and school status were pinched by the Zhang family, so she could only follow them back to Minjiang temporarily, and then take a step by step. Fortunately, the Zhang family didn't plan to announce her identity at all, so it would be relatively easy for her to leave the Zhang family completely in the future. Originally, she hadn't found a way out, but now Tong Yi has brought the opportunity to her door. Although she still doesn't know the situation at the original owner's grandfather's house, it is impossible to cultivate a family that has won the Lasker Medical Award for genius bosses than the Zhang family. Moreover, the book does not describe the situation of the heroine's grandfather's family, which proves that the relationship between the two families is not very harmonious, and it is likely that they have broken off. If so, that would be great. Seeing Zhang Hao's happy expression, Tong Yi's eyes seemed to be fixed on the cover of a magazine. He couldn't help but ask, "He's good looking." Zhang Hao is in a good mood now. She looked away from the magazine, turned to look at Tong Yi, and asked curiously, "Do you have appearance anxiety?" When he met for the first time in the academic affairs office, he seemed to pay special attention to other people's evaluation of his appearance. "Actually, don't worry, you're not bad looking." Zhang Hao was serious. Tong Yi. Although there is a slight difference compared to the one on the cover. Zhang Hao added very honestly. "This kid can't stand it anymore. The guy on the cover is almost 30 years old. Can I be compared with him?" Zhang Hao thought for a while, then nodded and said, "Okay. There's no comparison. The one on the cover is about whether she can leave the Zhang family as soon as possible, so it is normal to bring some filters." Tong Yi. The new classmates are a bit aggressive. Zhang Hao ended the exchange with Tong Yi in a happy mood, and took out the PEU test paper and began to brush the questions. For her, the top priority should be to prepare for the high school entrance examination, because her uncle might not recognize her, but the senior high school entrance examination must be taken. Tong Yi put the baseball cap on his head and continued to sleep on the table. When he woke up, he realized that the person next to him was still digging on the question, so he couldn't help but put his head together. At this time, Zhang Hao was concentrating on thinking about a math problem, and found that a shadow was cast on the test paper. She raised her head subconsciously, only to find that Tong Yi was also looking at the problem, and she was smiling and beaming. She pushed the test paper over. "Would you?" Tong Yi shrugged. "It's said that I'm on the bottom of my grade. Do you have a bad memory?" Zhang Hao took the test paper back with an expressionless face, ready to continue thinking. Tong Yi, who had just woken up, was very energetic and couldn't help chatting with her. "Have you never been in competition before?" Zhang Li frowned and asked, "You mean that this question is a competition difficulty?" Tong Yi looked at her speechlessly. "You ask me? I ask who?" "They all said that I'm on the bottom of my grade." Zhang Hao decisively skipped that question and started to read the next one. Seeing that she gave up so simply, Tong Yi couldn't help but wonder, "Don't think about it again." Zhang Hao shook his head. "My main task now is the high school entrance examination. If she wants to go to the best medical school, she must first be admitted to the best high school, and also to the best class. Although the competition questions can expand your thinking, their difficulty is far beyond the requirements of the senior high school entrance examination, so there is no need to spend too much time on them. After the middle school entrance examination, when you go to high school, you can consider participating in competitions." Tong Yi said slowly, "You can also win prizes by participating in the competition. The school will also give out corresponding bonuses." I heard that there is a lot of money. After being silent for a while, Zhang Hao asked, then there will also be many scholarships for the champion of the senior high school entrance examination every year. Tong Yi. To become the champion of the senior high school entrance examination, you will definitely be scrambled by several schools. Scholarships are definitely indispensable, but for the champion of the senior high school entrance examination, you have to have a little luck in addition to strength. I'm not confident that I'll be the champion. You really don't want to participate in the competition? Zhang Hao thought about it for a while, and said truthfully, let's talk about it in high school. After speaking, she buried her head and began to brush the questions again. Seeing her focused appearance, Tong Yi's eyes wandered, his eyes involuntarily falling on the cover of the Medical Weekly. In fact, not only the eyes and nose are similar, but the eyebrows are actually quite similar. There is also the kind of behavior that is not influenced by others after making a decision. It is also like a retreat. Shouldn't he think too much? When doing one thing seriously, I always feel that time flies very fast. The moment the bell rang at the end of the evening self-study, Zhang Hao stopped writing to pack up and prepare to go back to the dormitory. What surprised her was that Zhang Zhou was waiting for her outside the teaching building and asked her to talk in the woods of the school. Zhang Hao hardly hesitated, and followed Zhang Zhou to the grove. She looked at Zhang Zhou, you can organize the language first, say what you want to say at once, and try not to come to me if you have nothing to do in the future. A sneering smile appeared on Zhang Zhou's face. When you threatened RUO, were you very proud? Without waiting for Zhang Hao to answer, he quickly said, I came to you today, just to warn you, don't try to fight for things that don't belong to you. If you are smart, you'd better. Zhang Hao interrupted him, if you're smart, you shouldn't come to me, let alone anger me. Zhang Zhou was immediately angry, what do you want to do? I don't want to do anything for the time being. Zhang Hao looked calm, but have you ever thought about why I agree to your conditions? Zhang Zhou sneered. What else could it be for? It's not just wanting to retreat to advance, trying to win the sympathy of parents. The mother is kind-hearted, and may be affected by her little trick, but she will never be. I agree to your request, just because I don't like being disturbed. Zhang Hao asked and answered, but you don't seem to understand this. Zhang Zhou looked impatient, you don't need to say these hypocritical words, I won't eat you. Zhang Hao narrowed her eyes slightly, before I came to this school, I had expected trouble, but if you let me know that you are actively causing me trouble, then I will not cooperate with your words. Zhang Hao suddenly became tough, which made Zhang Zhou feel a little unsure, because he cared about Ruoluo, so he had to cast his arms against the rat. Before, he had always felt that Zhang Hao was acting in a pretentious manner, and he didn't want to watch her poor performance at all. But, what if it was true? Zhang Hao has nothing, she doesn't have to worry about anyone at all, if she really tells everyone the truth, how will Ruoluo handle herself in the future? Zhang Zhou decided to take a step back, you mean, as long as I don't take the initiative to trouble you, you will keep this secret? Zhang Hao shook her head, I can't guarantee anything, but if you bother me again, or cause me unnecessary trouble, the secret you want to protect will soon be no longer a secret. Zhang Zhou's eyes widened in anger, you. I think what you need to worry about now is whether others will keep it a secret for you. Zhang Hao looked at the banyan tree not far from the two of them. Zhang Zhou frowned, what do you mean? Zhang Hao still looked at the banyan tree, are you going to watch the show all the time? After she asked this sentence, Zhang Zhou's expression changed instantly. He quickly rushed under the banyan tree, and was about to go around behind the tree to catch the eavesdropper, when he saw Tong Yi carrying a very small laptop. A head sticks out from behind the tree. Zhang Zhou was surprised, why are you? Tong Yi leaned lazily against the trunk of the banyan tree, why can't it be me? Zhang Zhou sneered, I never imagined that the former genius boy Tong Yi would become a villain listening to the wall. Tong Yi glanced at him sideways, and said in surprise, this forest was contracted by your Zhang family. Zhang Zhou. If you don't want to be heard in the corner, you shouldn't come to the grove. People can be hidden everywhere, right? Tong Yi seemed to be answering Zhang Zhou's words, but his eyes were fixed on Zhang Hao, and his tone of voice seemed to remind him. Zhang Hao looked up at him. You should have guessed it long ago. Tong Yi was obviously stunned. Have you seen this all? Zhang Hao shook her head. I'm just guessing, not sure. Tong Yi shrugged and said with a smile, actually, I guessed it before, and I just decided it. Seeing the two of them chatting without anyone else, Zhang Zhou couldn't listen anymore. He looked at Zhang Hao with a cold expression. You actually told Tong Yi about the family. Tong Yi looked at Zhang Zhou with the look of an idiot. How can someone say something so obvious? Zhang Zhou. Your Zhang family has a son and a daughter, but suddenly went to the orphanage to adopt a child. Many people speculated that she was your father's illegitimate daughter. You should know about it, right? Tong Yi turned his gaze to Zhang Hao. However, she doesn't look like your father, but rather like Third Master Feng. If Zhang Hao and Zhang Zhou siblings get along harmoniously, he may believe that some people are born to meet each other, and the Zhang family is not bad for money, so it seems reasonable to adopt a child who is not related by blood. However, Zhang Hao and the Zhang family did not get along well. Before the class meeting, Zhang Ruo's performance was too clumsy. At first glance, Zhang Hao was very afraid of Zhang Hao's appearance. Zhang Zhou's incompetent and furious look just now also showed that he had a handle on Zhang Hao's hand. The most important thing is that Zhang Hao's appearance and way of doing things are almost like her uncle. If it was just speculation before, now he is 100% sure. Hearing Tong Yi's words, Zhang Zhou's face sank. He really didn't notice that Zhang Hao and Feng Qi looked alike before, but after Tong Yi reminded him, how could he ignore this again? But it wasn't like this before. In fact, even earlier, he had already found Zhang Li, and asked someone to investigate her, and personally observed her secretly. He was relieved when he discovered that although Zhang Hao had good grades, he was introverted and inferior. Zhang Hao always has thick bangs, and has a slightly hunchback. When speaking, he always keeps his head down, as if trying to reduce his sense of existence. Such a person would not pose any threat to Ruoluo at all, so he did not stop his parents from taking Zhang Hao home. But when Zhang Hao returned to Jiang's house, Zhang Zhou discovered that her back had also straightened, her aura had become stronger, and there was no trace of the past on her body. If it wasn't for him being a staunch atheist, he couldn't help but wonder if Zhang Hao had been resurrected. Zhang Zhou knew that asking God was easy and difficult, but he also had self-confidence and felt that as long as he watched carefully, Zhang Hao would not be able to hurt Ruoluo. However, in the two confrontations with Zhang Hao, he was actually at a disadvantage, and now he has also involved Tong Yi, the of plague. Zhang Zhou and Tong Yi are the same age, but he was crushed by Tong Yi since childhood. He could hear others praising Tong Yi wherever he went. As long as there is Tong Yi, he will always be just a foil. It can be said that the person he hates most in his life is Tong Yi. Even if Tong Yi has become a gangster who only drinks and fights, it still makes him unable to let go. Hearing Tong Yi's ridicule at this time, Zhang Zhou didn't want to lose his momentum. He looked at Tong Yi mockingly. I don't understand what you are talking about, but even if you go out and talk nonsense, no one should believe it. After all, who would believe the words of a bastard? Tong Yi chuckled and shook his head. She doesn't want to have anything to do with your Zhang family at all, so I'll keep my mouth shut. Are you satisfied? Then, he walked to Zhang Li. If you don't go, stay and feed the mosquitoes. Zhang Hao left with Tong Yi without hesitation. Zhang Zhou looked at the backs of the two and clenched his fists. In the past, Tong Yi was a genius in the eyes of all people, but he was humble and polite to everyone. Now Tong Yi is obviously rotten into the mud, but he is so arrogant. The only constant is, no matter which period Tong Yi is, it is so disgusting. After coming out of the woods, Zhang Hao planned to go back to the dormitory, but was stopped by Tong Yi. There will be a physical exam in 2 days. There will be a mock exam a week after the physical exam, and there will be scholarships for the top 30 in the grade. Zhang Li turned her head to look at him. Thank you. Tong Yudiao Erlang said, after a few days, after you know me from other people's mouths, it's not too late to say thank you. Zhang Hao shook her head. I rarely get to know a person through other people's descriptions. When she first read the book, she would indeed affect her judgment of a person because of the content of the book. But after getting in touch with Tong Yi, she found that the novel was too one-sided. For example, Tong Yi did not agree to the deal for her to write her homework, but took the initiative to propose that deal with the original owner. If you guessed correctly, it should be the original owner who was always targeted by the class. He couldn't see it, so he proposed that deal. In the eyes of outsiders, Tong Yi is also bullying the original owner. After all, few people are willing to help others with their homework. However, this is not a kind of protection in disguise. Because he was strong enough and didn't need to be protected at all, Tong Yi refused his offer to do his homework for him, but knowing that he was short of money, he took the initiative to lend himself a meal card. Zhang Hao didn't know why Tong Yi pretended to be cynical, but she never liked to inquire about other people's privacy. It's like Tong Yi already knew that she was Jack's biological daughter, but he didn't ask why Jac didn't recognize her. After separating from Tong Yi, Zhang Hao returned to the girls' dormitory and stood at the door of the dormitory. She took out the key to open the door, but found that the door was locked from the inside and could not be opened at all. Zhang Hao reached out and knocked on the door. His voice changed from soft to heavy, from slow to urgent, but there was no response from the people inside. Several girls in the dormitory hid behind the door, pointed their ears and listened to the movement outside. When the knock on the door stopped and there was no sound outside, a girl in red striped pajamas whispered, "We lock the new classmates in this way. Outside, isn't it too much?" Shen Mian waved, "What's the matter? It's just a joke, we'll let her in a while." Red Stripe said weakly, "But we don't know her well, if she gets angry." Shen Mian said carelessly, "If you are angry, you will be angry. It's just an adopted daughter brought back from the orphanage. She has such a weird temper, and I don't know where the confidence comes from." Another girl in blue plaid pajamas echoed, "You're right, people like those who grew up in an orphanage usually have a weird temper. If we don't give her a slap in the face, maybe she will be bullied by her." Red Stripe looked at Shen Mian hesitantly, and finally couldn't help but ask, "Did you have any holiday with Zhang Li? Otherwise, why don't you sleep at night, and even run to their dormitory to lock the door? It's not like a joke." But before Shen Mian could answer, the people in the dormitory heard the sound of the key turning in the keyhole. Several people thought it was Zhang Li, who was about to pretend to be dead when they heard the roar of the life teacher, who locked the door. "Don't open it soon." Shen Mian didn't expect Zhang Hao to go to the teacher. At their age, they solve everything by themselves, because no one wants to be ridiculed that they are a waste who asks the teacher for help when they encounter things. But Zhang Hao, she actually called the life teacher directly. She had no choice but to open the door. After entering the door, the life teacher looked at a few girls with a cold face. "Explain why you are targeting new classmates." Shen Mian glared at Zhang Hao, then turned to look at the life teacher with a smile. "We didn't target her, we were just joking with her." The life teacher frowned and said, "Are you joking like this? She just transferred, and you are not familiar with her." Shen Mian smiled cutely, "We know we're wrong, we'll change it next time." The life teacher looked at a few students helplessly, "Forget it this time, let's not do it next time, you guys." But before she could finish her words, she saw Zhang Hao, who was standing quietly beside him just now, suddenly walked up to Shen Mian. She pulled Shen Mian's school uniform collar and pushed her towards the balcony. Zhang Li's movements were too fast, and she was a head taller than Shen Mian, and Shen Mian was almost powerless to resist. When the life teacher reacted, Shen Mian had been pushed to the position of the washstand outside. She thought Zhang Hao was going to do something irrational, and was about to rush to stop it, but she saw that Zhang Hao had let go of Shen Mian, then turned around and closed the back door of the dormitory and plugged in the latch, isolating Shen Mian from the outside. Red stripes and blue plaids, you look at me, I look at you, and I can't say a word. They never expected that Zhang Hao would do such a thing in front of the life teacher. Even the life teacher was stunned and forgot to speak for a while. Zhang Hao ignored Shen Mian, who slapped the door furiously outside, and just looked at the three dumbfounded people in the dormitory with innocent eyes. I'm just joking with Shen Mian, it should be fine, right? A series of operations by Zhang Hao made the life teacher show an embarrassed expression. A little friction between students is always inevitable. As long as things don't get too big, she usually turns a blind eye and the matter is over. When arranging the dormitory for Zhang Li today, she also felt that this child has a good personality. He basically took the heavy things by himself, and was very polite when talking. Although I don't know what happened between these girls, Shen Mian kept saying that it was a joke, and promised that it would not be like this in the future, presumably it was not too serious. As usual, she planned to go with the thin mud, but Zhang Hao didn't cooperate at all, which made her face a little difficult. The life teacher frowned and said, classmates need to help each other and understand each other. It's not right for you to make things bigger like this. Zhang Hao looked at her innocently, but I'm just joking, shouldn't you tell me, forget it this time, why not do it next time? The red stripes and blue plaids were already dumbfounded at this time. They never thought before that Zhang Hao's character was so stubborn, and they didn't intend to save face for the life teacher. In front of the life teacher, Zhang Hao was already so arrogant, if the life teacher was not there, she would be even more scruples, right? They all said that they were afraid of being stunned, and they were afraid of dying, but they didn't dare to provoke Zhang Hao at all. At this moment, they were already starting to regret it, and when Zhang Li knocked on the door just now, she didn't make a sound. The life teacher's expression changed from embarrassment to anger. Student Zhang Li, if you think there is something wrong with my handling, you can say it directly, you don't need to be so yin and yang. Zhang Hao immediately put away the innocent expression, okay, then I think there is something wrong with your handling. Life teacher. She didn't expect Zhang Hao to react like this, as if she had already expected what she would say, and she had been waiting here for a long time. The life teacher became angry, it's just a little joke between classmates. Do you need to be on the line like this? After saying this, she went over to open the back door and put Shen Mian in. Shen Mian photographed the door outside for a long time, and the first thing after returning to the dormitory was to complain to the life teacher, Teacher, look at her, you are still here, she is so excessive, if you are not there, I don't dare to live in a dormitory with such a person. Shen Mian's voice was shrill, and the life teacher's brain hurt because of her arguing. She stretched out her hand and rubbed her temples, frowning and said, you're not from this dormitory, you came to other people's dormitory to make jokes, and you're so unreliable. Excuse me, do you want me to find your head teacher to solve it? If it wasn't for Shen Mian joking with the other two girls, she wouldn't have been told by Zhang Li that she wouldn't come down on stage. Thinking of this, the teacher of life looked at Shen Mian even more badly. After hearing from the teacher of life that she wanted to find the head teacher, Shen Mian lost her momentum. She didn't want to make trouble in front of the head teacher, otherwise writing a review would be a trivial matter. Seeing Shen Mian bowing his head to put on quail, the life teacher continued to scold, go back to your own dormitory soon. Shen Mian walked away in a daze. The life teacher sighed, then turned to look at Zhang Li, are you satisfied now? On the first day I came to school, I didn't have any interaction with them, but they were locked out of the door in the name of a joke. I just let Shen Mian experience the feeling of being locked out. For me, doing this kind of thing is a waste of time and energy, why should I be satisfied? Zhang Hao's tone was flat. Life teacher. She has never seen such a relentless student. But when you think about it carefully, what she said is reasonable, and it is true that people can't pick out any mistakes. The life teacher felt that if she continued to communicate with Zhang Li, her blood pressure would probably rise, so she turned her eyes to the red stripes and blue plaids who had been silent, and you too, let Shen Mian keep Zhang Li in the house. Outside, if there is another next time, let your head teacher solve it, I am too lazy to care. The red stripes and the blue plaids nodded again and again, showing an humbly educated look. After the life teacher left, Zhang Hao turned his eyes to the two roommates. Shen Mian is not from our dormitory. You put her in and shut me out. I hope there will be no next time. Red Stripe immediately waved his hand and said, it's not us, it's Shen Mian. Zhang Hao interrupted her, if you think what happened today is just a joke, then I will make such jokes with you a few more times in the future. Lan Gazi couldn't help but retorted in a low voice, Shen Mian has a cheerful personality and is very popular in the class. If we don't listen to her, she will take the lead in isolating us. Zhang Hao took a step forward with a chuckle and looked down at the blue grid, if this happens next time, I may find a lock and lock the door from the outside, or when you go to the toilet, pour a basin of water in from the outside, and Shen Mian may come to help you, right? After Zhang Hao said that, the people with red stripes and blue plaids were both stupid. They were sure that if Zhang Hao really declared war with them, Shen Mian would definitely not be able to help them, and maybe they would even gloat at the misfortune and watch the joke. Seeing that the two girls were restrained by him, Zhang Hao ignored them and went to the sink alone. The closing incident did not have much impact on Zhang Li, but Shen Mian, the initiator, was suffocated. As soon as she got back to the dormitory, she couldn't help complaining to Zhang Ruo, saying how unreasonable Zhang Hao was, and she didn't even pay attention to the life teacher. As expected, she came out of the orphanage and had no education at all. Shen Mian used spring and autumn brushwork to express that she was just making a harmless joke, but Zhang Li made a big deal of it, and wished the whole school would know about it. Shen Mian said that she was filled with righteous indignation, and her roommates also agreed, saying that Zhang Hao didn't know how to praise her, and said that everyone would ignore her in the future. Shen Mian talked for a long time, and her mouth was dry. She went to the water dispenser to pick up a glass of water, and complained while drinking the water, why don't you talk, Ruoluo? That Zhang Hao is so arrogant, you can't think of a way. Let Uncle Zhang drive her away. Zhang Ruo's expression froze, and after being silent for a few seconds, he whispered, she just speaks in a nasty way, not a bad person. Shen Mian curled her lips, if she's really not bad, then she knows that you're not feeling well today, so you should be concerned about it no matter what. But she pretended not to know, as if she didn't know you at all. I think you are too kind, otherwise she would dare to do this. Zhang Ruo frowned and said, you also know that our family adopted her for a reason, so don't say such things again in the future. The other two girls in the dormitory looked puzzled. Luoluo, is there a last resort for your family to adopt Zhang Hao? Shen Mian nodded, of course, otherwise why would the Zhang family adopt an orphan? Then, like pouring beans into a bamboo tube, she repeated what Zhang Ruo said in the cafeteria. After listening to her words, one of the girls suddenly realized, so that's the case. I wondered where Zhang Hao's arrogant capital came from. It turned out to be because of their father who helped Ruoluo in the past. Another girl frowned and said, the people who helped Uncle Zhang are Zhang Hao's parents, not herself, and she is an orphan now. Your family is grateful, but she doesn't know how to restrain herself, and she looks too ugly. Right. Zhang Ruo bit his lip and whispered, I only told you about this matter, please don't say it. Shen Mian patted his chest and assured, of course I won't say it out, otherwise some people have a bad view and feel that your family owes Zhang Li and the others, and that would be troublesome. Zhang Ruo looked at the other two girls again, and after getting their reassurance, she breathed a sigh of relief. As long as she survives the period before the high school entrance examination, then as long as she doesn't go to the same high school with Zhang Hao, she will no longer have to wear a mask to live. Early the next morning, Zhang Hao was awakened by the school bell. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling for a long time before realizing that she was going to live in a group in the future. She can study and live like a normal person, and she no longer has to worry about sudden illness and not being able to do what she likes. There is no morning exercise in Minjiang Foreign Language School, but there is morning self-study. After the students finish their morning self-study, they go to the canteen to eat. Zhang Hao almost stepped into the classroom, and her desk mate didn't come to the morning self-study at all. She must have overslept. This morning, the morning English self-study was arranged, and the English teacher had already arrived. Seeing Zhang Ling entering the classroom, her eyes lit up, and she followed Zhang Ling to the back row. She spread out the English test paper that Zhang Hao made yesterday on the table, and she said in a gentle voice, "My surname is Zhao, and I am your English teacher. Yesterday Director Li gave me this test paper, and I think you did it wrong. A few questions, now let me tell you something." This set of test papers was extremely difficult. Zhang Hao, a student transferred from the county middle school, was able to do this, which was beyond everyone's expectations. After Mr. Zhao read her test paper, she knew that this was a good seedling, and naturally she couldn't help but take more care of her. "Thank you, Teacher Zhao." Zhang Li sat down on Tong Yi's seat inside and gave up his seat. Teacher Zhao took advantage of the situation to sit down, and then began to give her a topic. Tong Yi came late after half the time of self-study, but he found that his seat had been occupied. Seeing Tong Yi appear, Shen Mian immediately showed an expression of watching a good show. She turned her head and whispered to Zhang Ruo, "Tong Yi has a weird temper. Zhang Li occupies his position, will he be cleaned up?" Zhang Ruo shook his head gently, "Tong Yi doesn't bully girls, and didn't they say that Zhang Hao and Tong Yi have a close relationship?" Shen Mian pouted, "That must be Zhang Hao, because of her beauty, she was pestering Tong Yi by. They didn't know each other before, how good can their relationship be?" Zhang Ruo lowered his head and stopped talking. In fact, when she was a child, she liked Tong Yi quite a bit, but her brother didn't like Tong Yi, and she was not allowed to run after Tong Yi like other children. She actually envied the children who surrounded Tong Yi, because they could call brother Tong Yi unscrupulously, and Tong Yi would also take care of those children patiently and teach them to make various models. But after that incident, Tong Yi seemed to be a different person. Many times he was smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He fought with those boys in vocational high school, sent others to the hospital, and occasionally injured himself, but he didn't seem to care about it at all. The former pride of heaven has already fallen to the altar, and when others mention him, it is only a sigh. Gradually, she didn't pay much attention to Tong Yi. Even if Tong Yi returned to school and became her classmate, she never spoke to Tong Yi. In this class, although Tong Yi is recognized as a person who cannot be offended, his sense of existence is actually very low, because he has not felt sorry for his classmates in the past few months when he came back to class. If Zhang Hao hadn't transferred over and became the same table with Tong Yi, I probably wouldn't pay attention to Tong Yi again. Teacher Zhao explained the test paper to Zhang Lujuan, and when she was about to leave, she saw Tong Yi standing beside her. She frowned slightly, bypassed Tong Yi and returned to the podium. Tong Yi reached out and knocked on Zhang Li's desk, "Occupying my place without permission, should I ask you for the rental fee?" Zhang Hao immediately returned to his position and retorted, "Then every time you pass by my position, can I ask you for the toll?" Tong Yi shook his head and chuckled, murmured, "Little cai fan." Zhang Li frowned, "Can you remove the word small?" Tong Yi bypassed her, returned to his position, and leaned against the wall softly, "Zhang Zhou and I are the same age, 2 years older than you." Zhang Li turned her head to look at him, "Then I'll call you Big Sleepy in the future." Tong Yi. Forget it, he couldn't tell her. While the two were arguing, the boy sitting in front of Zhang Li kept silently pricking up his ears. Then, while teacher Zhao was not paying attention, he secretly took out his mobile phone and clicked on a small group with only 10 members. Last night, Shen Mian and Zhang Hao had an unpleasant quarrel, and today it has spread throughout the entire class. Although most people are busy studying and don't care about the conflict between the two, there are also many people who want to vent their anger for Shen Mian. Originally, they thought that Zhang Hao grew up in an orphanage and was a newcomer. As long as everyone isolated her together, it would be enough for her to suffer. As for the rumors that Zhang Hao and Tong Yi had a close relationship, they didn't see it with their own eyes, so naturally they didn't believe it much. Especially the boy sitting in front of Zhang Hao. Last night, he vaguely heard the two chatting behind him. Although he didn't understand the specific content, the chat mode was obviously not very familiar. Therefore, they were not worried that Tong Yi would stand for Gracilia. But this morning, after seeing Zhang Hao and Tong Yi bickering, the boys in the front row were a little confused about Tong Yi's thoughts. He reported this to everyone in the group, and someone immediately suggested that he test Tong Yi's attitude. Maybe Tong Yi is not as scary as the rumors say? After all, he took the initiative to borrow a meal card from Zhang Hao, and Zhang Hao called him a big sleepy worm, but he didn't respond. The most important thing is that everyone has never seen him bully his classmates before. Maybe those rumors about him drinking and fighting are all based on falsehoods. The boy in the front row took a deep breath, plucked up his courage and turned his head, looking at Tong Yi with a stiff smile on his face. Tong Yi, I lost my meal card, can I borrow your meal card to use? Tong Yi squinted him and replied lazily, take that thing on your neck and replace it with me. This, ah! The boy was completely stunned. Tong Yi sneered, if you lose your meal card, you don't even know how to report the loss and make up for it. Is it useful for you to keep that thing? Boy! He was sure that Tong Yi was still the easygoing Tong Yi. He borrowed the meal card to Zhang Li, definitely because they had a close relationship. After being scolded by Tong Yi, the boy in the front row turned around in dismay and continued to report the news to the group of friends. However, he just typed a few words when he heard teacher Zhao's cold voice, Zhou Li, hand over your phone. Zhou Li. He may be the culprit Tai Sui. When the bell rang for the end of the early self-study, Tong Yi threw the meal card on Zhang Li's table, scallion pancakes. Zhang Hao was silent for 2 seconds and asked, I run errands for you, can I offset the money I used to borrow your meal card yesterday? Tong Yi turned to look at her expressionlessly, do you want to change your name to Zhang Papi? Seeing Zhang Li showing a slightly regretful expression, Tong Yi touched his nose and said, just brush it, just pay it back after you get the scholarship. Zhang Hao nodded in satisfaction, but then frowned again, if I swiped your card to the max, I'll be detained by the cafeteria staff, right? Tong Yi said helplessly, don't worry, I'm not as poor as you think. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hao left with the meal card contentedly. Looking at her slender back, Tong Yi hesitated, whether he should tell the people from the Feng family that Zhang Hao was the daughter of the Zhang family who lived abroad, and Zhang Ruo was just a fake. After hesitating for a few minutes, Tong Yi decided not to talk for now. The Feng family and the Zhang family have not had much contact for a long time. The third master Feng, who won the Lasker Prize for medicine, is obviously disgusted with the Zhang family to the extreme. The most important thing is that my aunt and Zhang Li's cousin Feng Yang got engaged a month ago. After that, the twin brothers of the Feng family were very proud in front of him and always regarded themselves as elders. If the people from the Feng family recognized Zhang Hao, wouldn't Zhang Hao also be a generation taller than him? No, can't say. Anyway, Xia Ki Fan is so powerful, even if there is no Feng family to cover her, it is impossible to be easily bullied. Taking a step back, even if someone bullies her, what's the big deal? After making up his mind, Tong Yi lay on the table and closed his eyes without any psychological burden. He didn't slowly open his eyes until he smelled the smell of scallion pancakes. Xia Ki Fan not only brought him scallion pancakes, but also bought him extra soy milk, which is quite conscientious. Tong Yi chatted with Zhang Li while eating scallion pancakes. What did you eat in the cafeteria? Chrysaleria answered truthfully, beef and rice noodles. Tong Yi couldn't help arguing with her. Alum is added to rice noodles, and if you eat too much, you will become stupid. Zhang Hao said, oh, then do you eat rice noodles? Tong also shook his head. Zhang Hao looked surprised, then why are you still at the bottom of the grade? Tong Yi. Can we still chat happily? Zhang Hao was completely unaware that she had pierced the heart of a sleepy worm. After she gave Tong Yi the meal card and scallion pancake, she continued to focus on the questions. Probably because her behavior of shutting Shen Mian out of the back door shocked the two roommates. For the next 2 days, they behaved very well and didn't bother her anymore. As for the followers of Zhang Ruo in the class, they didn't come to her to say yin and yang strange words, mostly because they were afraid of Tong Yi. No one was looking for trouble. Zhang Hao was happy. But the monotonous study and life only lasted for 2 days, and the physical exam was ushered in. Except for some students who apply for exemption or postponement of the test for special reasons, everyone has to take the test, because the results of the physical examination will be recorded in the total score of the senior high school entrance examination. For Zhang Li, sitting forward bending and standing long jump are not difficult. She scored 2 perfect points. When she ran 800 meters, when she realized that she was far ahead of the others in the same group, she thought she was also talented in long-distance running. But after running for a lap and a half, Zhang Li felt a little exhausted. After 2.5 laps, her physical strength was obviously overdrawn, and someone had already caught up and surpassed her. Only then did Zhang Hao understand that they were saving their stamina before, but unfortunately, she had no experience before, so she didn't realize this. After thinking about it, Zhang Hao did not deliberately chase after the members of the same group, but adjusted his running rhythm to avoid fainting due to excessive physical exhaustion. But even so, in the later stage, she still felt tofivi, not only sweating, but also breathing more and more heavily. When there were still more than 200 meters from the finish line, Zhang Li found that the people around her were sprinting, but she could do nothing. Zhang Hao kept her rhythm and ran to the key points slowly. As for how many points she could get, she could only do her best to obey the destiny. When she was only 20 meters away from the finish line, Zhang Hao breathed a sigh of relief and felt that victory was in sight. How could she know that a foot suddenly stretched out beside her, because she was not physically strong, even though she had seen the foot in advance, she could not avoid it. She can only adjust her posture in time to avoid injury after falling. The girls' long run was a group of 16 people. After Zhang Li fell, the 2 girls who were originally behind her ran away from her. The moment she raised her head, Zhang Hao saw Shen Mian standing at the finish line smiling provocatively at her, and even raised her at her. Intuition told Zhang Hao that the person who stumbled on her and caused her to suddenly fall was probably Shen Mian, but she had no evidence for the time being. Zhang Hao was about to get up, but a girl who rushed up behind suddenly stopped, reached out to help her up, and whispered the word "come on" in her ear. Before she could see who helped her, the girl let go of her and rushed to the finish line, and then several people passed by her one after another. Because everyone was wearing school uniforms and their sight was blocked again, Zhang Hao was even more unsure who was supporting her just now. At this moment, she can only rush to the finish line with all her strength. It is certain that she will not get full marks, but she does not want to deduct too many points. The full score of the 800 meter long distance running for girls is 15 points, and the time requirement is within 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Because of a fall, Zhang Li's score was 3 minutes and 58 seconds, and she finally only got 13 points. Because of severe physical exhaustion, Zhang Hao slowly walked to the edge of the playground, found a clean step, and was about to sit down and rest for a while when she heard Tong Yi's voice. Don't stop suddenly after strenuous exercise, it's easy to faint. He passed the bottle in his hand, drink some salt water first, and walk slowly. Zhang Li took the bottle containing the light salt water. After unscrewing the cap, she took a few sips of water and walked slowly along the periphery of the playground. Tong Yi asked curiously, "Did your school have no physical training before?" Zhang Hao thought about it and said truthfully, "Yes, but I didn't participate much." In reality, she can't do strenuous exercise at all because of physical reasons, so she has always been insulated from these sports. As for the original owner, she spent most of her time studying, because her talent in study is not particularly high, and if she wants to get a scholarship, she must put in more effort than others. Fortunately, the original owner's physical fitness is good, so even if she didn't participate in physical exercise much, she still got a good result. Tong Yi recalled how she was concentrating on writing questions, and frowned. Although study is important, necessary physical exercise is still needed. "You are too weak." Zhang Hao glanced at Tong Yi's sturdy forearm and nodded in agreement. She not only had to exercise well, but also learned some necessary self-defense techniques in case of emergency. The two walked side by side for a distance, and Tong Yi suddenly asked, "Just now Shen Mian tripped you on purpose, are you ready to forget it?" Zhang Hao was stunned for a moment and asked, "Do you see that she tripped me on purpose?" Tong Yi nodded, "I thought you wouldn't let it go." Zhang Hao couldn't help laughing, "Then you know me quite well." She hadn't seen clearly who tripped up just now. Although she guessed that the person was Shen Mian, she could only temporarily slow down the matter because there was no evidence. Tong Yi pointed to the location of the camera. "Actually, you can just make trouble with the invigilator, and then ask Yan Wang Li to monitor, so that you can also apply for a re-examination by the way." Gracie shook her head, "I'm worried that the school will tell me that the camera is broken in order to maintain its reputation." Tong Yi chuckled, "That's because you think too much. King Li of Yan has always hated evil, and he can't tolerate sand in his eyes." Zhang Hao looked up at Tong Yi, "Thank you for telling me this." Tong Yi shrugged and said indifferently, "It's not a big deal." He will take special care of Zhang Hao, and a large part of the reason is because of the third master Feng. Zhang Hao is the niece of the third master Feng, and he can occasionally see the shadow of the third master Feng on Zhang Hao. The scene of Tong Yi and Zhang Hao walking side by side along the edge of the playground attracted the attention of many students, including Zhang Ruo and Shen Mian. Zhang Ruo's physical fitness is not very good, so she applied for a physical exam exemption, but she still came to the exam room to cheer and give water to a few classmates who were usually good. Shen Mian looked at the backs of Zhang Hao and Tong Yi, and curled her lips in disdain. "I don't know what kind of ecstasy soup that orphan was used to giving Tong Yi, and Tong Yi actually gave her water." Hearing Shen Mian's words, Zhang Ruo's eyes darkened obviously. Tong Yi was a gangster, but he was also a genius in the past. Today, he is rebellious and hardly pays attention to his classmates, but he takes care of Zhang Li so much, and he doesn't shy away from anyone at all. "Gracilaria, is it really that special?" Seeing Zhang Ruo in a daze, Shen Mian gently tugged off her sleeve and whispered, "When I was running for a long time, I deliberately tripped over that orphan with my legs outstretched. She is probably depressed and didn't get a full score." Zhang Ruo's expression changed immediately. Did you trip her on purpose just now?" Shen Mian nodded triumphantly, "Yes. It's a pity that she didn't fall into a dog and eat shit." "It's a pity." Zhang Ruo frowned, "You shouldn't do this. If you are found, you will be punished." Shen Mian looked disapproving, but she didn't find out at all. Maybe she felt bad luck. "But there is surveillance on the playground. If she goes to the surveillance room to adjust the surveillance, you will be finished." Zhang Ruo looked worried. When she said this, Shen Mian was also a little flustered, but quickly calmed down. "She must not have realized that I tripped her on purpose, otherwise she would not be able to be so calm. You know, Zhang Hao is someone who is not even afraid of life teachers. If she really finds something, she will definitely make a scene immediately, ask the school to punish her, and then apply for a re-examination. Zhang Ruo sighed, just in case, you should quickly find a way to delete the surveillance. She knew it was Shen Mian's fault, but the consequences had already been done. Fortunately, Zhang Hao got a good score, which didn't affect her much. But if Director Li knew about this, Shen Mian would never lose only 2 points, so she reminded Shen Mian to delete the monitoring. Shen Mian nodded, then let's go to the monitoring room now. Let's say I lost my wallet, the teacher will definitely let us watch the monitoring slowly, and then we will find an opportunity to delete that piece of monitoring. Zhang Ruo hesitated, but I'm going to the high school to find my brother. I made an appointment before. Well, then I can only go by myself. Shen Mian was sullen. As long as the monitoring was deleted, even if Zhang Hao reacted, it would be dead without proof. After the physical exam, in order to allow students to adjust well, the school arranged for self-study on the day to prepare for the next mock exam. Zhang Hao didn't go back to the classroom for self-study, but went directly to Director Li's office. She and Director Li proposed to adjust the monitoring, and the reason given was that she fell while running, but she did not see who helped her. She wanted to adjust the monitoring to thank him. Of course, Director Li couldn't refuse such a simple request. He immediately took Zhang Hao to the monitoring room and asked the teacher in the monitoring room to help adjust the monitoring. Because he knew the specific time, the monitoring was quickly called out, but when Director Li saw the monitoring screen clearly, his expression changed. At first, when he saw Shen Mian stretch out his feet and stumble on Zhang Li, he also thought that it might be a problem with the angle of the camera, and worried that Shen Mian would be wronged. But then, he saw Shen Mian rushing to the finish line, turned around with a provocative expression, and pointed his at Zhang Hao. Looking at the combination of the two shots, the fact that Shen Mian deliberately tripped over Gracie is already solid evidence. Director Li turned to look at Zhang Hao. Have you suspected before that someone tripped you on purpose? Zhang Hao nodded very candidly, I'm just suspicious, not sure. So even though Tong Yi said later that he saw Shen Mian stretch out his feet and trip over him, Zhang Hao chose this euphemistic way to call for surveillance. Director Li suddenly felt that this child is not easy, probably because she grew up in an orphanage, so she was so cautious in her words and deeds. I clamored for the monitoring and applied for a re-examination. Shen Mian's matter, I will deal with it later. As for your long-distance running results, I will apply for the re-examination for you. Although it is a little troublesome, there should be a chance. Director Li's voice was gentle. Zhang Hao shook his head and said, there is no need to apply for a re-examination. I want to spend more time studying. Director Li frowned, you have deducted 2 points for long-distance running. Although it doesn't seem to be much, adding to the total score of the senior high school entrance examination can also get rid of many people. Zhang Hao still shook his head, even if I don't trip over Shen Mian, I may not be able to get full marks. If I apply for a retake, it will be unfair to other students. In fact, it's not uncertain. When she just adjusted the monitoring, she had already strictly calculated the time. Even if Shen Mian hadn't tripped her, she would definitely not get full marks, because she was overstretched at that time, and she couldn't be like other classmates at all. Make the final push. It can be said that Shen Mian is a villain in vain this time. Zhang Hao doesn't want to spend time and energy on uncertain things, not to mention that she has a mock exam next week, and she doesn't want to be distracted by labor. For her, getting a high scholarship is the most important thing. In addition, she has to find the girl who helped her up to thank her. Although that face is very unfamiliar, as long as she is in the same school, she will definitely have a chance to meet her, but she is not going to look for it with great fanfare. It would be more troublesome if the girl involved was also targeted by Shen Mian. Director Li. Just now, he only paid attention to Shen Mian's bad behavior. He really didn't pay much attention to the time issue, but strictly speaking, even if Zhang Hao didn't trip over, it would have taken nearly 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and she was obviously in a state at the time. It's not right, there's no way to sprint like other classmates, and it's impossible to get full marks. What's more, Zhang Hao had already left the examination room, and it was not so easy to apply for a re-examination. Seeing her frankness and determination, Director Li stopped persuading her. Shen Mian's behavior is too bad, the school will definitely deal with it, you go back to study first, and leave the rest to the teacher, okay? Zhang Hao nodded, thank you, Teacher Li. After leaving the monitoring room, Zhang Hao walked down the stairs of the office building, but bumped into Shen Mian at the corner of the first floor. Shen Mian was also surprised when she saw Zhang Lei, but she was slightly relieved when she saw Zhang Lei's expression was as usual, it didn't look like she had discovered anything at all. Shen Mian bypassed Zhang Li with a blank face, went to the monitoring room to find the teacher, and said that he had lost his wallet and wanted to call for monitoring. The teacher glanced at her and asked casually, "Is it thrown on the playground during the physical exam?" Shen Mian nodded immediately, yes, I have an ID card and a bank card in my wallet, so I must find them. You don't need to worry about me, teacher, I will just find them slowly. Don't look for it, go back and wait for the result. Seeing her puzzled expression, the teacher snorted coldly, if you don't study well at a young age, is it any good for you to get 2 less points in the physical exam? Shen Mian. It turned out that she had been exposed. Shen Mian Liashan Wuzhou left the office building and wanted to find Zhang Ruo to discuss countermeasures, but he couldn't find Zhang Ruo at all. In extreme anxiety, Shen Mian finally waited for the school's processing results, recording major demerits, reviewing in front of all the students in the school, and clearing the score of physical examination long-distance running. At that moment, Shen Mian felt that the sky was falling, because she understood how important these 15 points were in the high school entrance examination. When Ruoluo applied for exemption from the physical examination before, she felt very regretful. The full score of the physical examination was 50 points. According to the requirements of the Minjiang Education Bureau, except for the disabled, other students who applied for exemption could only get 30 points. Passing grades. But Ruoluo didn't seem to care much, because she felt that even if it was a normal reference, she might not be able to get 30 points in the test, so she might as well be exempted from the test. Besides, Ruoluo's family is rich and powerful, even if she does not perform well in the middle school entrance examination, Uncle Zhang can find a relationship to let her enter the elite class. She is different from Ruoluo. Her family background is ordinary, and her parents are just ordinary state-owned enterprise staff, and she has no connections at all. Her future can only be fought by herself. Although Shen Mian seems to be careless, she is actually a strong person. She knows that her grades in the culture class are not as good as Ruoluo, but fortunately, she has advantages in sports. But now the 15 points for long-distance running are gone, let alone the elite class, it's hard to say whether she can enter the experimental class of number 1 middle school. If her parents knew the reason why she lost these 15 points, they would definitely scold her to death. Shen Mian stumbled to the teacher's office, looked at any teacher in the class with red eyes, and begged, "Mr. He, please help me think of a way, I promise I will never do this kind of thing again." Teacher He frowned and rubbed his temples, "I don't know what kind of conflict there is between you and Zhang Li, but no matter what, you shouldn't trip over her on purpose during long-distance running. The test, that is to be recorded in the total score of the senior high school entrance examination, you can't possibly not know." I was also confused for a while, Mr. He, please help me. Shen Mian cried. Teacher He sighed, "Your punishment is under Director Li, I can't help you." Seeing Shen Mian's unrepentant appearance, Teacher He couldn't bear it, go to Zhang Hao to apologize and ask for her forgiveness, and perform well in the next period of time, and try to eliminate the demerit penalty before the high school entrance examination. As for the clearing of long-distance running results, there is no room for change, otherwise Director Lee will not be called Yewang Lee. Everyone knows that Director Lee likes students with good grades, but he pays more attention to the conduct of students. Whoever goes to help Shen Mian to intercede, isn't that hitting the gun? She can't go. Shen Mian stunned everyone in the class as soon as the criticism came out that she maliciously tripped her classmates in the physical exam. Everyone in the class knew about the conflict between Shen Mian and Zhang Hao before, but no one thought that Shen Mian would stumble on Zhang Hao during the physical exam. In the eyes of most people, Shen Mian is a warm-hearted person, although she is a little squeamish. Usually, when everyone asks her for help, she will basically not refuse. Would such a person really trip up his classmates maliciously in the physical exam? But if the situation is true, then Zhang Li is too unlucky. If she misses out with her favorite school because of the 2-point gap in the future, she will hate Shen Mian to death. However, before everyone had time to comfort Zhang Li, the punishment for Shen Mian came down first. At this time, everyone felt that Zhang Hao didn't need consolation, because compared to her who only lost 2 points, it was obvious that Shen Mian, whose long-distance running score was cleared, was even worse. If Shen Mian's grades were so good that she didn't care about the 15 points, no one would sympathize with her. However, Shen Mian's grades are not good or bad. Even if she doesn't lose the 15 points, she is still in the middle of trying to get into the elite class of number 1 middle school. Now that she has lost 15 points, she can't be admitted to the experimental class of number 1 middle school. Moreover, Shen Mian was also given a demerit by the school. If the demerit punishment could not be eliminated before graduation, the demerit file would follow her into high school, which would definitely affect the high school teacher's first impression of her. Those students in the class who had a good relationship with Shen Mian felt that the school's punishment for Shen Mian was too severe, and couldn't help but look at Zhang Li with condemning eyes. They believed that if Zhang Hao hadn't gone to Director Li to make a fuss and argue, Shen Mian would definitely not have been punished so severely. The boy named Zhou Li sitting in the front row of Zhang Li turned his head and questioned Zhang Li when Tong Yi was not in the classroom. You were only deducted 2 points, but it caused Shen Mian's long-distance running results to be cancelled. 0. Don't you feel guilty? Zhang Hao looked away from the information book, looked at the boy who thought he was righteous, and asked, if someone tried to kill you and only slightly injured you, but he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, what would you think? Guilty. The boy's face was flushed, and he said angrily, you are stealing the concept. What Shen Mian did to you is not that serious at all, and even if you don't trip over her, you may not be able to get it. Full marks. Zhang Hao knew that it would not make sense to talk to such a person. You should keep these words and talk to Director Li. He may think that what you said is reasonable and revoke the punishment against Shen Mian. Zhou Li. Even if he ate the gall of a bear's heart and a leopard, he would not dare to go to Hell King Li and say these words. The boys died down, but Zhang Hao chased after each other. I thought you had a sense of justice, but it turns out that you are just bullying the soft and afraid of the hard. Zhou Li. Bullying the soft and afraid of the hard? If Zhang Hao was considered soft, there might not be many tough people in this school. Seeing Zhang Hao's strong side with his own eyes, those who originally wanted to strive justice for Shen Mian all died down one by one. Shen Mian sat in her seat, holding the gel pen tightly in her hand, holding back her tears so as not to fall. She has regretted going to provoke Zhang Ling now, but it is absolutely impossible for her to apologize to Zhang Ling. Because she knew that even if she apologized to Zhang Hao and asked Zhang Hao's forgiveness, her long-distance running score would not be recovered, and the punishment could not be revoked immediately. If that's the case, why are you doing all this useless work? Zhang Ruo also frowned. She wanted to help Shen Mian, and she had already told her brother about it and asked him to help him find a way. But her brother told her that this was Shen Mian's own self-inflicted pain, so she should not get involved, and don't provoke Zhang Li's neuropathy. Zhang Ruo didn't even know that Zhang Zhou was threatened by Zhang Hao in the school grove, and thought that his brother would no longer spoil him like before. To be honest, she was very sad. Seeing Shen Mian's sad look, Zhang Ruo didn't listen to Jiang Zhou's words. When she returned to the dormitory that night, she took out her mobile phone and called Feng Yun. In Zhang Ruo's narration, it was Shen Mian and Zhang Hao who had a little conflict, and then tripped Zhang Hao on impulse, but she has now realized the mistake and regretted it long ago. Now Shen Mian's long-distance running results have been cancelled, and the punishment of demerit has been issued. In the subsequent criticism meeting, he has to read the review in front of the whole school. This is a devastating blow to Shen Mian, who has always been strong. Knowing that Zhang Hao was tripped, Feng Yun naturally couldn't help but worry, and she was slightly relieved after hearing Zhang Ruo said that she was not injured and that her physical examination results were not too affected. But when Zhang Ruo mentioned the punishment of Shen Mian quilt, the classmates in the class felt that Zhang Hao was making a big fuss and being unreasonable. She couldn't help frowning. She had been worried before that her daughter grew up in an orphanage and would inevitably be lacking in life, but she never thought that what she was worried about would soon become a reality. She had met Shen Mian, a very cheerful little girl. Every time they met, she would sweetly call her auntie, and she was inseparable from Ruoluo. There must be some misunderstanding between Xiao Li and her. Thinking of this, Feng Yun suggested, otherwise, if you invite Mian to your house this weekend, I will have a good talk with Xiaoli, try to resolve their conflicts, and then apply to the school to eliminate Mian's demerit punishment. No need. Zhang Ruo immediately refused, but she immediately realized that her reaction was a bit extreme, and quickly explained, little Li just came back, if we do this, she will definitely feel that we are all helping Mian, she will sad. She must not take Shen Mian home, otherwise if Shen Mian finds out that she is not the biological daughter of her parents, the lies she told before will be exposed. After listening to Zhang Ruo's words, Feng Yun also realized that her proposal just now was inappropriate. She sighed and said helplessly, then I'll have a good talk with Xiao Li during the weekend. Zhang Ruo originally wanted to convince Feng Yun to let her come to the school to give Shen Mian a demerit punishment, but after the two talked to her, she realized that her mother would never be as responsive to her as she used to be. Although her mother promised to have a good talk with Zhang Hao, Zhang Ruo knew that it was just useless work, because Zhang Hao was not a temperament to be manipulated. When it made Zhang Ruo more uncomfortable, during the call today, her mother didn't care about her life at school as much as before, but instead guided her to say a lot about Zhang Lu. She held back the sourness in her heart, and told her mother a lot about Zhang Li, including Zhang Li and Tong Yi becoming the same table, and some details of how the two got along. After hanging up the phone, Zhang Ruo lay on the pillow, and his whole body was in low spirits. At this time, she finally understood that even though her parents and brother had repeatedly promised that they would love her as always, some things had just changed.